We are one. We are. We are one. We are. We are one. We are and we are love. For we are one. We are, and we are alive. We are. You love me so much more than I could ever know. Your love is deeper than this world will ever show. And all of life's beauty shines around this moment now. The sky and the cliffs, they seem to change my life somehow. And I will never be the same. Will never be the same. Whoa, 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 I will never be the same. Never be the same. Ever again. Well, here I am waiting, Lord, my life is just for you. Please unfold all the plans that you would have me do. And if all the world's just a breath and nothing's here to stay, then all of the love we feel will save us anyway. Will never be the same. Will never be the same. Whoa, I will never be the same. Will never be the same ever again. Da 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 da.
Hello and welcome to another SDAQ&A. I'm your host, Peter Dixon, and my very special guest today is Hal Southwell. How are you, Hal?
I'm great. I'm
Good to have.
excellent.
Excellent. That is good. Hey, a
I'll
couple of
get
quick.
better.
Yeah, you can't improve on excellence. Hey, I love the guitar picture in the background.
Oh yeah, got
Yeah,
that
very
from
good. Very good.
some years ago.
I loved our promo pics with the ones of you there with your long hair. And it turns out we were kind of in Cooranbong at the same time growing up. You're a little bit older than me, but
Yeah,
I remember, the crew that you kind of hung around with, that kind of generation. And
yes,
I was in class with a lot of their younger brothers,
yes.
and I vividly remember that you guys kind of walking around town and school and church and whatnot with the long hair, and I thought, wow, that is weird. That is interesting. That's cool. Hey,
No,
just
it
a
is.
couple of quick things. Sorry, everyone. We were late again today. Just to prove that I'm not making it up. Um, Osgrid confirms is aware that you have power outage in Cooranbong, and then you can see it come up and say power has been restored. So we literally had the whole power go off. I thought for a moment it was because I hadn't paid my electricity bill or something like that, but turns out it was just a normal power outage. So yes, and another quick thing, I keep messing up numbers and stuff. I was saying yesterday that for this trip to America that I've got next week, I'm going to the former Adventist Fellowship at Loma Linda in California. Can't wait to go. I'll be flying out Thursday, so I don't think we'll have an episode next Thursday. You never know, might do one from the airport. We'll have one on Wednesday. But anyway, I was saying that I'd chosen to pay a bit extra to get good quality health insurance, and I paid 396, nearly 400 Australian. I extrapolated that to meaning I needed about 600 American. No, other way around. It's I think American would be around 220, $250 to equal, or maybe a bit more, but in the 200s USA, not 600. So I apologize for that. I appreciate a few donations that came in yesterday. I'm trying to raise that 400 Australian myself. The people that have organised me to fly over are paying my airfare and accommodation, but I want to look after the things like the health insurance and the long-term car park at the Sydney airport. So I've just put up on the screen there if anyone would like to. And Hal, I know that you've made a couple of donations of late, and I really appreciate that, mate.
So only one small one, so
Well, it keeps the channel going, and
yeah,
it gives me the opportunity to not only enjoy myself, but I think hopefully provide interesting information for Adventists of all across the board.
yeah.
So yeah, you can scan that there, or you can also just simply go. Where is it? Here it is. To paypal.me/Peter Dixon Music. It may come up as Avondale Music as well. So that would be a great help to the cause. And as I said, my very special guest today is Hal Southwell, former Adventist. We're going to listen to his story. And we kind of were a bit cheeky, weren't we? We have called this episode Jesus, the way, the truth, and the life, my journey out of Adventism. What are the implications there, Hal?
Well, I had second thoughts, as you know, about using that as a title, because I guess I don't ever want to talk anyone out of being an Adventist, um, but I have my journey, and journey was quite painful at times, as you can imagine. It was
Mm,
long, and it was tied up with a whole heap of hang-ups that made me realise that I guess that apart from all the noise that was going on in my life and my head about leaving Adventism, that there was one beacon, and that was Jesus, and He is the way, the truth, and the life. and doesn't mean that I'm the only one that's got the way, the truth, and the
Yeah.
law at all. It's just my story and my journey, and Jesus has been the beacon, and it's really, I guess, where I realised I had to hang on to through the journey. Yeah.
Yeah, and we were being a bit tongue in cheek. I'm the same as you. I think people I like providing lots of information and evidence and just realizing that God's given us our own brains to use, so
Yeah,
people can decide for themselves.
exactly.
And I know for you in watching and reading your posts, that you're not there to be critical and judgmental, but you enjoy bringing light to topics,
Yeah,
conversations.
yeah. Well,
So,
I guess you can only bring what you've discovered, and for me, I suppose there are times that what I've discovered makes um, certain aspects of Adventism would mean that when I make a comment, it could be somewhat critical, but I don't mean to be critical of people in their own particular walk, because everyone's got their own journey with that, and everyone's got to be responsible between themselves and God. At the end of the day, it's not between them, their religion, and God. It's just between them and Jesus and God. And but yeah, I can. Um, I suppose I feel at times I've got things that I could be, extremely critical about Adventism, but I certainly don't want to come across as a critic of Adventism, and I don't want to come across as someone that encourages others. I'd never encourage an Adventist to leave Adventism
yeah,
if if that's what they feel is 100% right.
yeah,
But
and and
if
you're
they
not
ask questions, I'm happy to answer
to
those
answer as
questions.
well.
Yeah,
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 yeah, and
yeah,
you're not coming across as a victim either. It's interesting the chat I had yesterday about the Carrie Johnson interview done in the early '70s,
yeah,
where it was just an absolute hatchet attack on Canright.
yeah,
And it's something that Adventists, it's kind of a default go-to. Let's tear the person down. They did it with Des Ford. They did it with Ballinger. They did it with
mm,
Canright. Anyone that seems to go against or criticizes the church, they're all up in arms. Oh, how dare you criticize us? But their response is to do almost a heinous kind of response, really,
mm.
to just character assassinate without looking at the
Content.
claims. Yeah, the
Yeah,
the
that's right.
content. Yeah, they're not refuting any of the content.
Yeah.
They're just attacking the person.
And
And
that's part of my journey. I realized that because I was, part of the Ford era and the
mm,
Glacier
mm,
View,
mm,
and there was so much attack on the person that made me suspicious.
interesting.
Well, yeah,
Yeah,
well,
yeah,
what's that about? Why aren't we talking about the
mm,
subject matter?
yeah.
Hmm.
And I
What's
think
this person got to do with
the reason that the conversation is ongoing, like the Glacier View, the Des Ford, Canright, it's ongoing because there haven't really been any you know, um,
it? Hmm.
reputable defenses or criticisms against the claims that these critics of
Hmm.
Adventism are making.
Yeah,
So, look, take us back a little bit, and let's get into this journey of you leaving
sure,
Adventism. Talk a little bit about Kurumbong, your early years. Was
sure.
it conservative, etc.? Um, a few people have asked about was it George Southwell or the Southwell
Yes,
that lived in the area that did bird sounds? Tell us
yes, that
about how
was.
you're connected to him.
Yeah, sure, sure.
And I'm
Yeah,
also interested just to take a little note in the back of your mind there, I'm interested in exploring how you felt even more deeply during the whole Glacier View period. You were smack bang the right age to fully grasp, whoa, hang on, what's going on? I was a little bit younger, could see stuff. I could see all the young ministers leaving, but I didn't fully put the pieces together until the early 90s.
sure.
um, so yeah, cover all that as well, and then I'd like, if you can, so a bit of early history, dig a bit deeply about what was going on around the Ford era, and I'm very interested in if you could actually list a few things that you think were key moments and key topics, um, about Adventism that led you out of Adventism? What were some of the key things?
Sure. Well, as I start rambling on, bring me back on track on those points you just
Yes,
made.
and I'm sure our friends watching and commenting will
Bring us back on
bring us
track.
back as well, and we'll look at some questions later too coming through.
Yeah, sure. Well, my lovely mum and dad were much older than me. My dad was born in 1906. Can you believe that? So I was born quite late in life. In fact, he didn't marry, I think, until he was 42. And I'm the youngest. My older brother, who just recently passed away, was 12 years older than me. Now,
Wow. How old was your dad again when you were born?
well, he was, that's a good question. He was
Just interests me. That's
50, 57, I think,
wow.
if I got that right.
Mm.
I
So
think
in
I've
his
done the math.
50s.
I'm just
In his 50s anyway.
yes. Actually, 54, perhaps.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
can't do maths real quick on the
No, that's all right. I'm just interested, as you
somewhere in
know,
there.
because I'm an older dad as well. So
Oh, so yeah,
yeah, so my Renee was
yeah,
born when I was 50.
yeah. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, so that's
Yeah.
just interests
But
me when I meet someone that's a child
yeah,
of an older
yeah.
parent.
So my folks did. My dad met my mum at college, Bible college, and he's got a fabulous story about getting to college. It's quite miraculous because he grew up in the back blocks of Victoria, born in a bark hut that his dad had made with compacted dirt floor, with stringy bark walls. They made bush poles, and I don't know if you know what stringy bark is, but you can peel
Yeah.
the bark off a stringy bark tree and make sheets of it. And they made the roof and walls, a two-room shack, and he was born there. And uh, long story short, went fishing and became an Adventist, and wanted to get money to go to college, and so went fishing. And he was a great fisherman for 6 or 7 years. Lived on a boat, and anyway,
Wow.
met mum at college. Got moved before they were married. Got moved to Western Australia to pastor a church. During that time, I corresponded with my mum and eventually got married, and they started a family in Western Australia. After some years, he was moved to Lord Howe Island, and pardon me, I assume, given the age and one thing or another I'd heard from mum and dad, perhaps an accident might have occurred on Lord Howe Island, and I turned up.
Ah.
So I was born while they were over there, and then they came back to Sydney. Dad had developed asthma, and quite chronic. He got double pneumonia while working at a Adventist camp, packing up in the rain and one thing or other while he had pneumonia, and he was very, very ill. And he developed asthma that basically killed him eventually out of that. And because of his asthma, there were times he'd get up, on a Sabbath morning and he couldn't preach. And he felt like he couldn't continue as a minister if he wasn't reliable. So they didn't ask him to hand in his credentials, but he resigned from, a pastoral role, and they offered him a job at the SHF at Curramore. So my very first memories are living in Currans Road, Curramore. As a toddler, I think I was 18 months or two. No, I was 3, I think, when we moved to Curramore.
Right.
And I've got one. We had a bushfire, quite a bad bushfire that burnt the neighbour's house down, and I do remember the neighbour coming up in a real old jalopy vehicle.
Yeah.
And of course, Mum had been talking about the fire brigade coming, and for many years later, I used to think the neighbour was the fire brigade. I used to call it the fire brigade. Anyway.
Did you know the Nobles at all?
Noble. No.
Right. Okay.
Doesn't ring a bell.
They're Adventist family that lived there my whole life as well on Currans Road. but yeah, probably different, bit younger than you.
Yeah. Anyway, so I grew up in a very conservative Adventist home, and Dad was very old school, and I went to primary school there, rode my bike through the bush track, and it so happened that Des Ford lived at the end of Currans Road. He would walk to college, and he would always walk very briskly, and we'd often see him and, "Hello, Dr. Ford," we'd chat away as kids. And I've got one memory of, I don't know why, we seemed to be walking. Maybe we were just pushing our bikes and walking, I can't remember, but it was pouring with rain coming home from school, and we hadn't gone to school prepared with raincoats or anything, so we were sopping wet, a few of us, and here comes Dr. Ford walking, flat out, and he looked dry, and we said, "Hey, how come you're dry?" And he said, "Oh, I've learned how to dodge the drops." So he was always, he had fun interaction.
And it's a classic Des Ford comment because he was so witty and quick.
Oh, really? Just straight off the cuff.
Yeah.
I've learned how to dodge the drops.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I think I went to high school there at Avondale, and in what you would call grade 9 now, which was third year high school, Dad, we sold our home in Currambong, and Dad moved out closer to the lake. Dad could never get away from being on water. Living in a boat for 6 years, a young fellow, sailed all around Gippsland and up to Eden and around, and it was in his blood. So everywhere he went, he made some sort of a boat that he could sail. And so I remember he cut up a whole heap of bush timber. We had 4 acres at Currambong. It was mostly bush, and he cut down with an axe and then a saw. He sawed up timber, and he made the backbone and the frames of this boat from that timber. He had to buy marine ply, and he scraped and saved. He bought the sail material and sewed it up on a Singer pedal sewing machine. But we had years of fun on Lake Macquarie.
Yeah.
He had the boat up in Dora Creek when Dora Creek was quite a good place for swimming, so he moved closer to the lake, out to a place called Buttabar near Wanji, we simply called it those days. And I was in my, I finished off a year at Avondale whilst we'd lived out by the lake, and I had to have a lot of mornings where I hitchhiked to school and a lot of afternoons where I hitchhiked home. The bus went, I think, as far as Araring, and I'd hitchhike the rest of the way.
Wow.
There was often a family that would pick up their kids, and we had arrangements where I'd go with them, but they weren't always there. So, So I remember not once a week, but probably at least once a month having to hitchhike home. Imagine that this day and age.
Incredible. Yeah, you'd never do it now.
And then the next year after that, I went to Hamilton SDA.
Yes, okay. In Newcastle.
And I suppose I hated, because I'd grown up in Currambong and all my friends were there, I hated the idea of leaving. But within a year or two, it was a sense of relief, to be quite honest.
Really?
Yeah.
Why is that?
I think I realised that I was in a very tight circle, and if I'd stayed there, I would have just stayed in a very tight circle. Yeah. And of course,
do you think too, because back then, I know when I was in mid high school, how do I say this? And I think it's probably everywhere, but there was a bit of a kind of for want of a better word, wild kind of. There was a lot of young kids into drugs, and I remember thinking we'd moved away to Fiji and some other places for a while, and a lot of my friends in primary school, when I came back in high school, were now doing drugs and stuff like that.
Oh,
There
true.
was a bit of an element around Cooranbong in the late 70s that was just a bit rough and ready, and it
Yeah.
filtered into the Adventist kind of system as well. Are you referring
Well,
to that kind of thing, or are you just meaning
no,
theologically, or
I don't know. There
just
was
closed-mindedly?
closed-mindedly, I think, because I wasn't in the wasn't in the Cooranbong community. I was in the Adventist community, and once we moved away from there, we had non-Adventist neighbours, and we developed
Right.
friends. Mum and Dad developed friends that weren't Adventists, and it was just something refreshing about it. Not,
Yeah.
I haven't really analysed a lot, but it was
No.
a little bit of a freeing experience. Well,
Yeah.
not sure if freeing's the word, but it was. I guess it expanded my
Expanding.
horizons
Yeah.
a little. Yeah,
Expanding.
yeah,
Yeah.
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 And so left high school, got a job in Newcastle as a TV antenna rigger for
Ah,
a year, 2 years, and my mate and myself, because we were surfing at the time. My mates that I went to school with, his parents had moved up the coast to Foster Tuncurry to manage a caravan park. And he was living in Newcastle with his older sister, married sister. And he said to me, "Why don't we go to Foster the long weekend in October for go surfing?" Great idea. Stayed with his folks, and we had fantastic surf, not crowded. We're driving home, and we're going, "Why on earth are we living in Newcastle? Why don't we just move up there?" Surf was so good. So we tossed in our jobs, both of us. He checked with his folks whether it'd be okay for me to move up there with him. And I moved in with this lovely couple. They were just amazing. No, they were Adventists. They were Adventists. Ron and Peggy Lachlan, and many people might be listening might know Ron and Peggy.
yeah, I recognise that name.
Ron was a little fella, little Scotsman with a Scotsman's temperament. He was wild and mad. He was madman. He was
Short
crazy.
fuse.
No, not so much as short. Well, he could, but he'd brought his temper. He'd learnt to handle his temper. But he was a funny fellow. He was,
Yeah.
he'd talk to anyone he didn't know, and he'd always have a name for them. He'd be walking down the street with him, and he'd just say hello to someone. He'd say, "G'day, Cedric, how you doing?" And keep walking. He'd just make up a name. It was funny as a fit. I loved them.
What did
And
the people say when they called a name that wasn't theirs
that just looked
by,
strange.
by a stranger? How old were you when you did that? Took that
I
move?
think I moved up there when I was 19.
Wow.
Yeah. So they were wonderful to me. They were like family to me. And it was through Ron's efforts that I actually came back to church. But at that time, Joe and myself which is their son, Joe and I were not, we weren't Christians at all. We weren't living a Christian lifestyle. We were surfing and doing everything else that went with surf culture. Not that everyone that surfs is part of that culture, but it let us. We went to the pub every weekend, and we eventually got into light drugs and nothing heavy. And but we just lived that lifestyle, like a little bit hippie, a little bit surfy, and then I got into music. I'd sort of dabbled in playing a bit of guitar at high school, and then I sort of left that behind, went surfing. But I don't know, it must have been in my early 20s. Yeah, I think I was a year or two after we'd moved to Foster. I got interested in that James Taylor, Cat Stevens, John Denver acoustic music.
Yeah.
I thought, I know how to play acoustic a bit. So anyway, I bought an acoustic, and I just took up with I just took it with a passion, and
Yeah.
I wouldn't go surfing with mate because I was flatting with Rod Rose. I don't know if you remember Leo Rose. He was the
Yes.
president of
That's
various,
yes.
I think, the Adventist Union in
Yeah.
somewhere. Anyway, he had various roles. He was in Brisbane at one stage, and then he
Right.
was, I think, North New South Wales. Then I think he was the Sydney, or anyway, I can't remember.
Yeah.
But he was a president of some sections of
Yeah.
Adventism.
Yeah.
Anyway,
And quite well respected from memory
Oh, he was a lovely guy.
Yeah,
The
yeah.
whole family are lovely, lovely family, and Rod and I are mates to this day. And Rod married because
And
he
Rod
didn't.
is Rod his son, is it?
Yeah, Rod is
Yeah.
his son, and he and I. Well, look, I missed out part of the story, but the time living in Foster, we had mates at Port Macquarie, and Rod was one of those mates. Long
Right.
story short, Rod ended up coming and staying at Foster, and he and I got a flat together, and we flatted for many years, and we were great mates, and we had so much fun. He's a very good surfer, much better than myself, and he ended up becoming a surfboard maker, and still is today. Still makes surfboards today,
Wow. Hey, quick
and
side thing, because it's like we've had these parallel lives 8 or so years in a different order.
yes,
But I was dating a girl called Margaret Jones from Coffs Harbour. I'm just trying to remember what era that would be, late 70s.
Adventist
And
girl.
Adventist girl. Her father was a
Mm.
doctor, but her brother was about your age and surfed
Oh,
all the
okay,
time as well, like huge
okay,
surfer. And he
okay.
put me onto Neil Young and the album
Yeah,
Harvest. Harvest. I was
harvest.
staying at
Yeah,
their place, and I had a similar epiphany to you with
yeah.
guitar. Like I was already playing guitar, but I started
Okay.
playing that kind of music, and songs
Yes.
like Sugar Mountain and Needle in the
Yeah.
Damage Done and that sort of
Yeah.
stuff. And I just went down
Yeah.
a similar pathway. So
Yeah.
anyway,
Right.
sorry,
Yeah.
I'm not meaning to infuse my bits, but I'm trying to work out where there's some overlaps, if there are any.
Yeah.
So
Well,
anyway, back to Rod and
Rod and I flatted for many years, and long story short, we both end up coming back to church, and I came back to church as a result of Ron Lachlan, who I'd been living with earlier. He'd always been dropping books off to me, and he'd never criticised anything, never did anything, but he'd come and go, "Hey, how you doing?" And he'd muck around, and then he'd go, "I bought a book for you to read. I think you might find it interesting."
yeah,
And
okay.
as a result, one weekend I'd made a decision, and Rod had gone to Newcastle for the weekend because he was dating a girl that used to live across the road from me in Currawong by the name of June Cleverton. You might know the
Oh
Clevertons,
yes,
and John.
yes,
Yeah,
very well. Yeah,
John's younger sister, my age, June.
yeah. And there's
Rod
another
was going.
younger one called Narelle Cleverton, who was
Correct.
in my class. Yes, so we've
Oh,
got we've
okay,
kind
Morel,
of got a.
you're that age.
I knew we'd get a
Yeah,
meeting point.
connection. Yes, yes.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah.
anyway, Rod ended up marrying June, and but that he came back
Right.
from that weekend away, and I said to him, "I've got something to tell you." And he said, "Yeah, I've got something to tell you." And I said, "Well, you first." And he said, "You first." And I said, "I've made a decision to go back to church." And he said, "Oh, that's exactly what I've decided."
Isn't that interesting?
Isn't it interesting? Yeah.
Yeah. So what
So,
year was that?
mm,
Sorry to keep putting you on the spot with dates,
uh,
times, and ages.
70, about 75 or 76.
Okay, okay.
Yep. Yep. It's probably
Yeah.
75.
So
Yeah.
how did you both respond with that very interesting coincidence?
Well, it was a God moment, It was a God thing. It was amazing. So, uh, we started going back to an Adventist church. It was the only thing for me to do because I was brought up in Adventist, and I made a decision. And I think initially it was, I always knew that I wasn't right with God. And I thought, if anything happens to me, I'm lost. And I thought it was because I wasn't going to church and living the lifestyle. Well, I came back to a church, and I've been trying to think of the pastor's name. Not that it's important, but came back, and there was a really good minister that preached the gospel, and they moved him on not long after, and then we got another pastor who was probably even better. He preached the gospel and the gospel only, and I don't know if I should say names or anything at this
Yeah, yeah, it's
stage, but
good to say
his
names.
name
We're
was
not
Des.
criticizing.
No, his name was Desmond Hale. I
Right.
think he went on and got a doctorate. I think I'm not sure after that, but he was our pastor, Des Hale. In fact, it was an interesting story there because he arrived and he was married to Mrs. Hales, who was my grade 4 teacher at primary school. I forget what her first name was. Anyway, too much waffle.
You know, the
Anyway,
Adventist.
yeah, so he preached the gospel and preached the gospel. And I'd never, it was eye opening to me. It was absolutely eye-opening to me. And then not long after, there was, I mean, if you're in any Adventist church, you heard about what was going on with Des Ford. And of course, I asked my pastor about it, and he was a bit careful as to what he said. But I can't remember what I did, but I started getting tapes and I started getting books and I started trying to find out about what was going on. And because once I came back to the church and was, I suppose, somewhat grounded in the gospel, the whole 1844 investigative judgment doctrine was always a bit, how does that fit in? Because it was like, well, I'm not sure how that fits that well with the gospel. So in my mind, that was there's a little bit of a funny tension there to begin with. And when the whole issue came up with this Ford, of course, I was interested. And I was never a Ford fanboy or any of that sort of thing. I was just interested to find out what he said, and I found that he was quite balanced in his views. And he said, this is all I found. I'm not trying to make a new doctrine or change things. It's just these are some of the problems I see. And the more I looked into it, the more I could see that they were problematic. Some of these issues were problematic with that doctrine. And so I can't exactly remember the chain of events, but I became more and more, I suppose, inquisitive. And then I moved to Melbourne for a year. I had a mate, my mate Rod, his older sister Jennifer married Peter McDougall. And
Oh, yeah.
I knew Peter, and Peter had asked me to come because at this stage I was a builder and a carpenter. I'd finished my apprenticeship, and he asked me to come and work on his yacht that he was building. So I went and lived with them in their home for a year. And while we were there, he was very interested in this topic as well. We had many long discussions. We went to seminars while we were in Melbourne, and we went to a Robert Brinsmead one on Sabbatarianism as well.
Wow.
And
You're at all the key spots.
yes, and that really got me, I suppose, stirred up. And coming from an Adventist background, the Sabbath is it's almost indisputable because it's so ingrained, and you have a theology that almost is watertight from an Adventist point of view. And he kept on. Well, he made comments that I thought, well, no, you're throwing the Sabbath out. And I made comments that, he had questions afterwards. And I said, so how does any of what you're talking about delete going to keeping the Sabbath? And he said, well, it doesn't at all. I'm not saying that. I'm not saying it deletes the Sabbath or it does away with it. It just that it expands it. If Matthew 5 and what Jesus said, that he came to fulfill the law and not to destroy it, but came to fulfill it. And then he immediately went on to explain what that meant. He said, you've heard it said, don't commit murder. I'm telling you now. So Jesus made it much bigger. And he said the same about adultery. So Jesus was talking not about some ceremonial law, about sacrificial law. He was talking about the Ten Commandments as well, because that's basically 2 verses on. He starts talking about that. And so I went away from that thinking to myself, how do you fulfill the law of don't kill? That's by, loving others all the time and not hating anyone. So how does the Sabbath fit into all that? And his take on it, because I bought the book and I read it a couple of times, and his take on it was, well, the only way you can fulfill the Sabbath is it's got to become bigger than what it was in the Old Testament. It's got to be much bigger than that. Just the same as the law of adultery is much bigger than that. The law of murder is not much bigger than that. As Christians, we don't go around talking about and thinking, well, how do we not kill someone? That's the law's not that small anymore. The law is much bigger than that. How can I love the person that hates me? How can I do good to those who have abused me? That's the mindset the new mindset of the new covenant. And I wanted to know how that the Sabbath fitted into all that. Anyway, I figured that out, I guess, in my way. And I'm not saying that I'm 100% right. All I know is that I can't see it any other way. And once and someone could come along and make me understand something deeper again. But from my perspective, if I'm not living every day 100% for God, as Romans 12 says, offer yourselves a living sacrifice. This is your true act of worship. That's not something you do once a week. Living for God is not something you do once a week. Keeping, your whole life separate as a rest, to rest in God every day is what's made the whole Sabbath doctrine bigger. That's from my perspective. I'm not trying to convince anyone else here. So I came to terms with the Sabbath thing slowly over years, and it was really hard and painful. But in between time, I was still keeping the Sabbath and believed in the Sabbath, but it just, there was this whole journey going on in the background. I moved from Melbourne back to Foster and was going to church there. And I'd taken up a friendship with a girl from Foster, and we were getting more serious and going to church there. And because I was a questioning person, apparently they didn't appreciate it, because the father of the girl I was going out with, who became my wife eventually, they'd gone to him, or some of the members had gone to him and said, "Look, can you tell Hal we'd prefer if he didn't come to church?" So that was a bit of a
Wow.
bombshell for that family as well. So they stopped going as well.
Yeah, there's a kind of
So
a theme running through Adventism where they don't like you asking questions.
no,
And the sad thing is that usually at the start, they're very honest, authentic. They always remain that way. But I mean that you're not asking because you're trying to criticize or condemn. You're just trying to find out. They're coming from a very
exactly,
authentic place.
exactly. And I kept the whole Sabbath thing very much to myself, because I knew I couldn't go there at church with that. But I
Mm.
could go there with other things like the investigative judgment and lots of other things where it didn't make the gospel clear, and so I was very gospel focused, I suppose, in any comments that I would have made in a Sabbath school environment or whatever. Anyway, so they asked me to leave, which was, I guess, pretty hard. And so I wandered for a number of years, and I still knew that I was a Christian, and I was still going through this whole Sabbath issue, as if I'm keeping one day a week. Am I fulfilling? Am I fulfilling the law in its completeness, as Jesus came and said? Now, it doesn't mean you can't keep the Sabbath. It just means that, from my perspective and my way of thinking, was that it's got to be bigger than just keeping this one day. Anyway, I'd worked through it enough to a point where I was comfortable with where I was at, but I wasn't fellowshipping anywhere, and I was struggling. And at that time, my then wife left with her boss that she was working with, and left me with two kids, one 3 and one 6. One about to turn
Wow,
3 and one about to turn 6.
that's big.
Yeah, so that was a rude shock, and I just didn't have I suppose, the wherewithal, the skill to deal with it. And I went downhill pretty quickly and pretty badly. But in between it all, I had a mate I used to surf with who was the Salvation Army, or sergeant, I think he was, but it wasn't a trumpet, a brass band type Salvation Army. They were acoustic guitar type
Mm.
church, and
Mm.
he invited me to come along. And I ended up going to their home groups and going to church there for a year or two, before I moved away from Foster. So, but in that time, I suppose the one key thing that happened to me, and this is a key issue in relation to properly starting to think outside of the box away from Adventism. I was at one of the home group meetings, and someone had passed away, and they were talking about being with Jesus, because they'd been sick and they're in a better place. And so I waited till after everyone had left, and I said to my mate Gary, I said, Gary, how do you actually believe that when you die you go to heaven? He goes, yep. And I said, oh, well, how do you reconcile that? And of course I went down the track of my Adventist theology of that you're asleep in the ground and your breath of life goes back to God and you return to the dust. And when Christ comes back, the dead in Christ will rise first. And he said, yeah, I understand that, and I believe that. And I said, well, how do you believe that if you believe that they're already in heaven? And he said, well, quite simply, if I can contain God in my head, he's probably not much of a God. He said, you've got to remember that God is eternal backwards, eternal forward, and that a linear time frame is probably not even a thing. And he said, you could be dead and laying in the grave and also alive at the same time. And I said, well, and my head started, and I'm doing this thing, and I'm thinking, well, that doesn't make sense. And he said, no, it doesn't have to make sense. And I remember driving home thinking, well, this is crazy. And I thought, you know what? If I can't comprehend it, it's probably more like God. It's probably more like the truth.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the first key thing that started to break me away from thinking about doctrines in little boxes. That God can't be contained. God's not, there's a lot of things that God's, he's spoken, the universe came into place. Like, well, you've got no idea. So, there's people that believe that when you die, you go straight to heaven. They've got all their verses for it. And, Jesus said to the thief on the cross, all those things. Well, I don't, you know what? I sort of came to this point where I realized, you know what? That doesn't matter. God is bigger than I can comprehend. If you die and go straight to heaven, or if you die and stay in the ground, either one of those is fine. I know that there's a few things that are non-negotiable, and that is he created, and he created us with choices. We chose poorly. He rescued us, and the only way to be reunited with him is via the one who rescued us. And they're non-negotiable. And that's clear as a bell in the gospel. There's other things, like the state of the dead. I've got my own views, and I think the Adventist view is probably the right one. But I don't hold it. Like I don't care. If someone believes the other, so what? It doesn't matter to me. It's not a salvation issue at all. So that was a key turning point, if you like, on my journey, because I realised a lot of things, and I started to think about the investigative judgment in the same terms. Well, if the investigative judgment's correct, and I don't believe in it, am I still saved? If the investigative judgment is not correct, and I believe in it, am I still saved? Like, the answer is both. Yes, you're still a saved person. So why even talk about it? Like, it's a non-issue. It's not a salvation issue. And so when I moved from Foster to Hobart, my elder brother was living here, and anyway, long story short, I moved down here, a bit of a sea change because of this messy divorce, and had a couple of kids on my hand. And
the kids go down with you?
Yeah, what happened is the youngest one ended up going with her mum. I'll take a little side journey, and no, I won't go there. But anyway, long story short, the youngest one ended up staying with her mum, and the older one stayed with me. And the older one came to Hobart with me, and then we shared school holiday times between Hobart and Taree at that time, where our mum was living. So the kids saw me and they saw their mum. When I came to Hobart, I came here because, long story, but anyway, I was friendly with a girl down here as well, and she was an Adventist, and so I was going to an Adventist church with her, and I thought, okay, well, maybe I've got my perspective on things, maybe I can make this work. Well, that was unbelievable. I came back into an environment of where every week we go to church and they preach doctrine, and I scarcely heard the gospel, and it was so hard. And in between times, I'd go to church with her on Sabbath, and I'd go looking for other churches on a Sunday night. Anyway, that fell through. Anyway, I started looking seriously for a church, and I went to a church here, which I never end up making my church home, but I went to a church here that had a guest speaker, and the guest speaker was marvelous. He preached the gospel. It's fantastic. But there's another turning point in my life, is that they had somewhat contemporary choruses, and they had I suppose you call it a band, but they had a group of musicians, and they sang these songs. I didn't know any of this. I think I might have known a few of the songs, because I think at that time Adventists were still starting to sing a few choruses in the 90s, early 90s.
Yeah.
Pardon me. Anyway, This is what happened, is that they were singing these songs, and it was lovely, it was beautiful, and then they finished a song and they just kept playing, and the next thing the congregation just launched singing. The whole congregation just with harmonies, and it was the most. I thought, have the whole congregation come to a rehearsal here? What's going on? The musos are playing this music; they're just going on.
Yeah.
And of course, I understand now the musos were improvising, but people were singing out what was in their heart. People were just singing a song to God, and they were singing melody based around the chords that were being played, and those chords were just repeated, like 3 chords being repeated or whatever it is, and it was the most beautiful experience, and I was almost weeping. It was that intense. It was just this amazing time of reverence and awe before God. People just singing out their heartfelt, were just singing their heart to God, singing about how they loved Him. I can't remember words or anything. I just remember it was just this most beautiful experience, I suppose. And Christianity is not based on experience; it's based on a few things, but experience comes into it. And God made us with emotions for a reason. And He made us with a head for a reason as well. I understand that. Anyway, I finished there, and I sort of didn't want to leave. The service was over, and I was sitting there, and people came up to me because I was new, and they were chatting away, but I didn't want to talk. I just sat there, and I was just having this moment with God. Anyway, because people wanted to talk to me because I was new and one thing, that sort of broke across all that. And anyway, finally we left, and we're going home, and my daughter, who was she 10 at the time, she's in the back seat, and I'm driving home, and I'll need to make a 2-minute backtrack on this. While I was in foster, I got into music, got into bands, then became a Christian, and couldn't stay in the band because it just wasn't my scene. My mates, during the break, they're out there, smoking a joint, getting drunk, and at that stage, I was really just not into that scene, and it was really hard. And they were really great mates, but I eventually left the band, sold all my gear. I was never a great muso, but we could sing perfect harmonies. Like the guy that I met in foster was in bands in Sydney, and his band was the support band for the Beach Boys in 1964.
Wow.
His band, most of those musos went on to become session musos. The guitarist became the session guitarist on the Today Show, where guests had come on and they just put
Mm.
music in front.
Where they'd go. Yeah.
He toured with the Daly Wilson Big Band.
Oh, wow.
He was on there was only one artist in Australia who had a payroll and kept them on a payroll, and that was Slim Dusty. He toured and he worked with Slim Dusty and Anne Kirkpatrick, his daughter.
Yeah.
We went to Sydney to see him for a weekend. He was playing in a jazz bar. We went down to the jazz bar and he's just playing phenomenal jazz. So this guy came from a very, very professional musical background and
Yeah.
taught me. In fact, the first time he invited me, because he'd seen me sing, and he said, we should get together. So he was a frustrated muso that had got married, moved back to Foster because he came from, and was wanting an outlet, wanted people to play music with. And I had me over, and he's playing a couple of songs. And he said, do you know this Beatles song? And he said, do you know the harmony? I said to him, what's a harmony?
Yeah.
That's how little I knew.
Yeah.
Anyway.
What was his name? Do you know? Do you remember?
Yeah. Wayne Holstein. If you ever want to Google Wayne Holstein, you'll get a bit of history, a bit of story about various bands in Sydney.
Yeah.
He's still alive. He's a bit older than me.
Wayne
living in Newcastle. Holstein. Holstien, I think it is.
Right.
Wayne and Terry Holstein. Great friends still. Lovely people. Beautiful people. So I'd been in the band. I left the band because I'd become a Christian. I couldn't sort of hang on to the scene any longer, and I still kept my acoustic guitar, and I'd get it out occasionally and play a James Taylor song to myself or for my daughter or something. But I had this, I suppose, passion for music inside. So let's fast forward back to where we were. I'm coming home now, driving home from this church service that I've been in, and the music and the whole thing had such an impact on me. I was driving along thinking about it, and I heard God's voice say, "This is the reason I created you with a passion for music. It's for worship." And you know what? A light switch went on. Bang. I knew why I'd been created. And it was just, I had a purpose for being a Christian. I had a purpose for laying down music. I had a purpose for getting into music in the first place. And now, not that music is worship, but music can be worshipful, and you can use music as part of worship. So I eventually found a lovely church home, Eastern Shore Baptist. I had a place I was working at. I was working for a building company, and we employed a new person on staff. And I said to him that I was a Christian. He said, "Yeah, I'm a Christian." And he said, "Where do you go to church?" I said, "I'm looking for church." Anyway, he invited me to his church. I went there, and it was just immediately as I got there, this is home. Beautiful. I went to church there for 3, 4, 5 years and was not involved in music in any way.
Wow.
I eventually was asked to do an item, and I did Steve Grace's Great South Land. I think because there was a Sunday that happened to be an Australia Day.
Yeah.
And the pastor at the time knew that I played guitar, and he said, "Is there anything you can do a special item for us on Australia Day?" Anyway, I sang the Great South Land. You know what I'm talking about?
Yes, I've sung it myself a few times.
Yeah. Well, I put a video together back in the days of when you put a videotape together with beautiful scenery, and it was just in time, just went through beautiful Australian scenery. And it was my very first time. I hadn't played in front of anyone since before my divorce, and my divorce knocked all my self-esteem out, and was completely. So I was still a shell of a person in some ways, and coming to know a church family that just accepted and loved you as you were was a beautiful thing. And they got me to do this song. Anyway, I get up, and beforehand there was a guy that I knew went to the church. He was a beautiful bass player, a conservatorium trained, and I asked him to help me out with the song, just play a bass just to fill it out a bit. He said, "Yeah." So I start the song, and he's come up to me and said, "You haven't got your capo on." and I knew without the capo I wasn't going to be able to sing the low note.
Oh no.
So I'm mortified. So I thought, what can I do? I stopped and I said, and I was just so embarrassed. And the guy running the tape, he had to rewind the tape and we started again. And it brought the house down. They just loved it.
Yeah,
And I
nice.
was fully accepted, like it was
Yeah.
just, all of that was part of the healing of my, I'm not sure self-esteem is a good word because people mix ego and self-esteem up. But self-esteem is different to ego. Self-esteem is knowing who you are in Christ. And I was getting to know that again. And these people really helped that. And I was there for many years until I felt God. Baptist system's great. And Baptist people, in fact, I see those people. I've been back there and I see them at the supermarket and things, and you'll hug. And, there was an elderly lady there that played the most beautiful piano. She played for the Rosny girls, Rosny Children's Choir, and they toured all over the world. The Rosny Children's Choir. She played for them. She was in our church. And, I still see her from time to time. She comes and gives me a hug. She's on a walking stick now.
Yeah.
But just beautiful people. But the Baptist system is based on a majority vote. And anything that happens has to go to the majority. And of course, there's no system's great. The Adventist systems, of running a church is not great. Baptist system's not great. The Australian Christian churches is not great. All of them, because there's no perfect system. God's got the perfect system because we're all humans. And the issues, people, infighting about things to do, and you want to do some mission stuff. Well, we want to put some church money to this. Do we have to take that to a church vote? Just everything happens so slow. So I eventually moved on. A friend of mine who got me going to that church, my mate who worked for this building company, he went on and became a minister and was asked to minister a church called Hobart Christian Life Centre. And they had 3 churches. They had one in three of them in different suburbs. And he went to the one, and I lived not far from him in the same suburb, and we went to that church. So I eventually moved to that church with him. Was there for quite a few years. While I was with the Baptists, wasn't long after I did that item where I made a fool of myself. They asked me to come and become part of the team, and then wasn't long after that asked me to become the worship pastor there. So I was the worship pastor there for some years, yeah. And they asked me because what happened is the team collapsed. A lot of people, some people had moved away, some people had moved churches, and other people just had enough of being involved every week. So I started with myself and this beautiful piano player who played for the Rosny Choir. So sometimes I was myself on acoustic guitar, sometimes it was her and I. And then eventually we had a drummer and a bass player come along and built quite a team at the end where we had beautiful singers and singers that could sing beautiful harmonies. And I left there and moved to church my mate was pastoring, and about a year after that he asked me to take on the worship team there as well, become the worship pastor there, which I did. And that time, both of those times were beautiful times. And when I left the Baptist church, the thing about the Adventist church, when I left, there was no contact, and no one ever came to visit me. No one ever said, "Oh, come to church and we'll pray for you." Left the Baptist system. Said, "I want to finish up." And I said, "Yeah, sure." And they had me, and they had a whole group of people up front praying for me, and just God's richest blessing on everything you put your hand to, and it's just a beautiful thing, And you realise that every one of these little steps is like, I am free from that horrible tight situation where you couldn't ask a question, you can't, and if you do, you're out of it. And if you wanted to leave the Baptist church, great. As long as you're going somewhere, love you, and we want the best for you. So that was a beautiful thing. And then some years after that my mate who was the pastor of that church was part of 3 churches, and there was an oversight pastor who I suppose I found, just because of the system, the Australian Christian Churches system, have often strong leaders. The churches are pretty much independent. He's got 3 churches, and I felt there was some strong handing that and as a worship pastor, I started to get this struggling to lead worship or to be on part of worship, bringing my right heart with some of this political stuff going on in the background. So I prayed about it, and I made a decision to leave, and I had the same thing happen there. My mate had left, but who was the pastor
really?
because of it. Yeah, he basically what they wanted to do, the head pastor, the senior pastor across 3 churches, wanted to sell that property and build one mega church.
Right.
And my mate who'd taken on this small church was given to him by someone from an ex-Brethren church. He handed it over, and he said that he wanted that property to always remain a church property in that local community, and made my mate make a vow before God not to sell that property. Now some years fast forward, this senior guy now wanting to sell the property, and so my mate, who's the pastor of it, has made this vow to the original guy who built the church, was the pastor of the church, and never took a cent in. He tent-maked his whole life, and he just couldn't agree to selling the property. So he moved on, and of course this was again back when I felt I had to move on, and I struggled, and I was visiting a few churches, and I visited a church called Grace Church, and it just didn't feel like home to me. And I visited a few churches, and I was getting out of bed one morning because I'd been to 8 church every Sunday looking for somewhere to go. And I got out of bed one morning, not even thinking about it, not praying about it. I put my feet on the floor, and I heard God say, "Go to Grace," which was a church. Go to Grace. And I thought, where did that come from? Why not Grace? And I thought, oh, I've heard that voice before. And I've been at Grace ever since.
Right. So how long ago was that?
2007, I think. Yeah.
Right. Was your daughter going through to the different churches and stuff on this journey as well?
Yes, she was while we're at Baptist church, she finished school, or still at the Baptist church, yes, I think. And she wanted to go to Hillsong College.
Right.
Which was a bit of a stretch for me because my daughter, we'd been together for a long time, and we were a little bit, I suppose, if I think back, we'd grown a bit dependent on each other, and she wanted to move, and I thought she wasn't super academic. She's gone on and got a degree at the moment, but as a mature person. But at the time, she didn't apply herself very well, and I thought, well, great opportunity to get out of Hobart and see the big wide world. And so she went to Hillsong College at the time, which was brilliant for her. I remember we sat in the car park. She had a little dormitory she shared with girls, and I sat in the hire car outside, and we sat there in the front seat, both bawling our eyes out. And she eventually said, "Dad, it's not getting better. It's just getting worse. You're going to have to go." And I said, "Exactly." So off I went and left her, which was just, pretty tough time.
Yeah, yeah.
But it grew her, and she doesn't go to a Hillsong church, but it grew her, and it grew her as a person as well as a Christian. She had to stand on her own 2 feet. She had some decisions to make. And she went on and became a worship pastor at a few churches, and one thing another. But I think that's probably pretty much up to speed with where I'm at.
And you're doing worship music at this Grace Church?
Yes,
And it's in Hobart, is it?
Yes, I'm not worship pastor. I'm just on the team.
Right.
Yes.
So you play guitar and sing vocals and harmonies and that kind of thing.
Look, I've stopped singing a fair bit the last 10 years because a lot of young people that are coming on. So and I because I'm not a super proficient musician, I just took up acoustic guitar and learned to pick. And then I eventually took up electric guitar and played it the same way for many years and eventually learned my way around it. So I'm a bit of a bushy. So singing, playing electric guitar is more of a challenge for me. Probably not so much for someone as competent as yourself. But ripping off into a lead break while I'm trying to sing is sometimes, I can't quite get it. But anyway, so and at the church at Grace, they needed me, especially in the early days, more as an electric guitarist because they had a couple of acoustic guitars. And so I haven't sung much for a long time, and when you don't use it, it's a muscle. You don't use it. Oh, when I start to sing something, I think, oh, my voice is just
Takes a while to warm up again, doesn't it?
oh, it's nothing like it used to be. And I used to be able to click into harmonies just immediately.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. And I hate off harmonies. And then when I start singing one, it's like, oh, no.
Yeah. Can I raise a couple of things from that amazing kind of testimony and life story that you've shared there? A lot of Adventists I've heard recently talking about how they can kind of reach people and reach the secular community and whatnot, but it seems like they're not offering a lot of pastoral care to the members. I just notice Adventists, they put on functions, have some great church gatherings and meets and whatnot. But you were mentioning when you left the Adventist church, there was that moment where you said that someone had said, can you tell him not to come anymore or something like that? And
That was it.
Cindy Lou wrote at that time when you said it, can you just imagine Jesus on the Mount of Blessing? Hey, you on the left over there, yeah, get up and run along, please. A Christ-focused church just doesn't do that. And you mentioned when you left, there's no contact. I was the same when I left. Two people contacted me, but only one actually came to my house. And I'm okay with that because it seemed normalized to me. I wasn't expecting any different. But as I look back on it, I think what an opportunity the Adventist church pastors have or leadership have of actually reaching out to their formers with just a bit of love and compassion instead of this slight, like I'll often get messages, oh, you haven't done yourself any favors now, Pete, by interviewing this person or that person. And these are Adventist pastors and leaders at quite a high level. You haven't done yourself any favors. And I think, like, what have I done? Like, what is it? I'm just chatting to people. They seem to want to reach out, but on the other hand, they don't actually do it.
You can usually, how can I say this kindly? But usually, if there's not something positive and something upbuilding to say, and you say the opposite to something that's upbuilding or positive, you have to question where it's coming from.
Yeah.
And of course, when I left the Baptist church, one of the pastors that was there, we're still good mates. He's just a lovely, beautiful man. And leaving my mate's church, when he left, there was an interim pastor came in who was a semi-retired, he retired pastor. I still, they actually come to Grace on a semi-regular basis once a month, and I still, he just loves me and cares for me and took time to call me numerous times afterwards just to love on me, say, hey, mate, thinking of you,
Yeah. And Adventists love doing things in a systemic kind of way. You'd think, why don't they just set up a system where they at least have someone head of a committee that looks out for people that have left the church and just reaches out and to build a culture of accepting people that have left and moved on instead of the subtle ostracism that goes on.
I'd go a step further that it should happen
from the heart.
Spontaneously.
Yes, exactly.
You shouldn't have to set up a committee or here's the pastoral care person of the church.
I know.
His job It should just happen organically, and
That's what I'm saying. At the
it
very
tends
least,
to,
they
in other
should do that.
churches I've been involved in, it just all happens organically.
Yeah. Well, I
Just
chatted to one union guy who's got is struggling to understand why people are leaving the church at huge numbers, and I said, well, why don't what have you got in place to sort of stop the leak? And he said, well, I've got a 6-point plan. I said, why don't you come on the program and share that? I'd be happy for you to share your 6-point plan of how to keep young people in the church. But he didn't want to come on the program because he didn't agree with some of the people I bring onto the show. And I thought, but here's the audience watching there's a lot of former Adventists, current Adventists, conservative, liberal, progressive, every kind of Adventist. A lot of secular people have started watching as well because they're interested in what on earth is this podcast we've got here. But there seems to be an inability to express from the heart this true love of the human being.
and it comes back to an understanding of Matthew 5, where Jesus said, I've come not to destroy the law, but to fulfill it. And if the law's made bigger, if we forget about not murdering someone, we've got to just love on them. We've got to love on them,
Yeah,
regardless of who they are.
yeah.
And that's, having got away from Adventism, other churches spend huge amounts of money on programs outside of their church. It's not to preach the gospel to people, but just to bring them relief from poverty, to bring them, we support some missionaries in Vietnam, and you're not allowed to preach the gospel in Vietnam.
No,
But they were
just love
called.
on them. Yeah.
They were very rich people. They came to Hobart, started a business. The business went broke. They still had money, but you know what? With the little money they had, God said to them, "These are just not preachers, not trained pastors." God said to them, I want you to be missionaries in Vietnam, and to support. There was a missionary couple there that they were supposed to support. Well, they got there, and this missionary couple said, "God has called us back home." So they were left there on their own. This couple, they're not preachers. They're just you and me, Joe Blows that, became quite wealthy, had a beautiful home overlooking Merriweather Beach in Newcastle, sold that, came to Hobart. Their business went broke. They're just struggling, just ordinary Aussies. They've gone to Vietnam. They've been there for 20 odd years. And you know what they do there as missionaries? They put in water systems in villages. They put in programs where they buy a goat, and that goat that's already artificially inseminated, and that goat will have a kid, and they can sell that goat. They can keep that goat. They've got milk. They build these little enterprises. They help struggling communities in Vietnam. They look for these struggling communities. They go in there and they just simply say, how can we help? And they raise money. They build water systems, purification systems. They've been doing it for 20 years.
Wow.
The government have heard about it. They can't preach. They don't do any preaching.
No.
They're just there to serve because they love. They love people. And they've, the last 10 years, they've realised that, there's sex trafficking is just such a huge thing.
Wow.
That there's between 40 and 50 million slaves in the world today.
Disgusting.
It is absolutely disgusting. And I sometimes get to this point, and that's why I tend not to get too involved in discussions about investigative judgment or arguments about Sabbatarianism or whatever, because there's actually real people in slavery today. Like, what are we doing about that?
Yeah.
Far out. This is, if we're to love people. Anyway, don't get me started on that. That's my high horse.
No, I think it's important, and I think it's important to be able to talk about a variety of things. You can still talk about these interesting things, but if you find yourself spending 90% of your time on the investigative judgment and not on, hang on, what can I do over here to help some people in my community that are literally sleeping out under the stars? Something's going wrong. Yeah.
Anyway, 10 years ago, they realised how many people were being trafficked. And so she's done a program, and she's got it into all the schools through the government of Vietnam. and it's a program to help primary school kids and early high school kids to make them aware of sex trafficking and all the subtleties that go along with, the offers of jobs and all that. And this program and the sex trafficking in Vietnam, since they started this program nationally, and now the program, that other countries are asking for this program, that this young couple, or not young anymore, this couple that we support as missionaries in Vietnam, wrote this whole program. It's now being bought by other countries, other Asian countries, to run through their schools. And so I just think, people, and they're not getting, they can't preach the gospel.
Yeah.
I just think, and I go to this Grace Church, and I love the people there. I love the pastor there, but it's not a dynamic church. It's not we're very laid back. The preaching is a teaching style, very laid back.
Yeah.
We're very conservative. We've got people from all sorts of views. I mean, there's people that come to our church that don't believe in a hell, period.
Yeah.
There's other people that believe in hellfire, as in eternal.
Yeah.
Oh, you're welcome.
Yeah.
But our focus, we had a church building in the city when I first started going back. Just prior to me coming to the church, they'd sold that premise because it was getting too small and it was a heritage listed and we couldn't expand it, and so they sold it. And a long story short, couldn't find anywhere else to meet for a long time. Hired other churches for periods of time. Anyway, long story short, we're getting desperate, and an old pub in a low socioeconomic area, an old tavern came up for sale. And the real estate agent contacted the pastors and the elders, and they went and looked at it. And here's this old pub. It's run down, and it's got quite a large area. It's got car parking. It's stunk, and toilets like you. Anyway, that when I was starting to think about that, and at the same time, someone from the schools that I work for, the association of schools, I work for Christian Schools Tasmania as a project manager. We're building various things at the moment, but classrooms and playgrounds and sports ovals and all that sort of stuff. So I manage all that. But the CEO of Christian Schools, unbeknownst to me, approached my pastor and said, "Look, we know you haven't had a church home for a while, but we've just built a hall at one of our schools in this certain suburb, and this is the same suburb where this old tavern had come up for sale." Long story short, we bought the old tavern, we've converted it totally to a community centre. We won't hold church there because we don't want it to be a stopping point for community to come and use.
Right.
So we hire the school hall every Sunday. We set up, it's pretty easy. It's a good hall. It's got good equipment, and it's a lovely modern facility the school built for themselves. But it's a win-win for the school because we hire it out, helps them pay for it. And they offer us, because it's a Christian school, we're not associated in any way. It's completely independent from us. They offer it to us as a church group on a quite reduced rental, so it's quite somewhat affordable. But we've got this whole building that we paid $1 million for, as a small church of 150 people, that we have renovated into a community centre, and then we raised, with some help from funding, another $650,000, nearly $700,000 to build a kitchen, a commercial kitchen for a group down here, which is a non-profit group called Loaves and Fishes, who feed the poor.
Wow, I
love meals to the poor.
Yeah, I love that.
And out of that kitchen that we gave to them, we spent $750,000 of our own money. Well, we didn't raise it all because we did get some government grants for it, because it fitted in with the criteria. We had to apply 2 years in a row to get it. We've given it to them to use. They use it. They're producing between 7,000 and 8,000 meals for hungry people per week.
That's so good.
So the whole idea of our church is, it's not about Grace Church as a church. It's about what are we doing in our community.
I love it.
And there's no strings attached to that. We're not providing those meals and preaching the gospel. It's just providing meals to the poor.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
That is really great. I'm glad you're sharing that, because it gives people ideas also to do it in their local area. People that are watching, why not encourage Adventists, whatever denomination, agnostic, whatever you're a part of. These are great little strategies and techniques and ideas to implement. Yeah.
and when I was an Adventist, I never came across an Adventist program that wasn't Adventist,
Yeah.
didn't point back to Adventism,
Yeah.
where all of our programs point. Our pastor is so heavily involved in the community.
Yeah.
He's gone to the community because we live. The church is in a low socioeconomic area.
Yeah.
One of probably the second worst area in the Hobart area.
Yeah.
And they have their own, not called this now, but the progress associations, etc. That type of thing. They're not called that. There's a number of things that the community are doing to sort of pull the community up from the bootstraps. So our pastor's gone along and said, okay, we're a church in your community. What can we do to help you with your programs and what you're doing? And what is it you've got coming up in this year? And they said, oh, we've got this program coming up. Okay, how can we help? Oh, okay, we need help setting up tents and things to do this market we do once a year. Okay, so our whole church volunteered and we came down, we moved tables and chairs and tents and put them up and put banners and road signs, the whole thing. We just looked after it. And it's for them, their community thing. We're just, how can we support you? And now,
Yeah.
of course, they want, often now they're using, often they needed a building and they only had, small little halls in the area. Well, now we've got this old tavern, old pub, that has got a couple of, we've made one nice big auditorium so that people can have things there. And for community stuff, that's theirs to use.
That's so good. Yeah, that's great. Adventism often presents itself as a sales funnel for money and membership. I want to just give a plug to ADRA, though, our local ADRA. So I'm not talking about whether ADRA is a Adventist kind of entity, but the local ADRA shop, or whatever you'd call it, is massive, and boy, they do incredible things for the local community without any kind of proselytizing.
Okay. Good.
I'm good friends with the manager, CEO, whatever there,
Yeah. Okay.
and he is just doing incredible work there, and I
Right.
love that kind of thing. So it's definitely possible within Adventism, but as a structure and a system and a denomination, the general public looks at Adventism and just says, "Oh, something fishy here. What do they really want?" And I think there's ways they can address that and change that. I'm just going to bring in a few comments, and then we're going to have a short break, and then I want to chat about why you think the Adventist gospel is different to the gospel. I was chatting to John Rosier quite a while back, and he won't mind me saying this because we'd said it publicly live. He was saying, look, not only is Adventism not the gospel, it's anti-gospel. And that really got me thinking, because we can say, hey, yeah, look, you're not really preaching the actual gospel. It's a little bit cray-cray and confusing. And but to think of, hang on, not only is it not the gospel, which you can sort of go, okay, if it's anti-gospel, that's something that should maybe give you
It's
pause
a bit more
before.
problematic.
Yeah. I want to tease that apart. Like,
Sure.
what is this gospel of Adventism that potentially is disruptive to the biblical gospel? I'm interested in your thoughts on that. After we've just brought up a couple of things here,
Yep.
there was a couple of funny comments too. I wanted to. I'm not sure if I can find them still. I might have to just read one. One was Stephen Beagles. He said, "Why is it harder to make friends in a church than in a bar?" And George said, "Peter, you made a mistake." This is when I asked that guy that had the 6 points of
Oh, yeah.
the six plans to help keep young Adventists in the church. You asked him a question, thus he won't come on your program. And that reminded me of something else that he said too. He said, "Oh, and I wouldn't come on your program, and I don't support it. You've not done yourself some favors recently, because I've been interviewing." And this was so kind of what his job is, to explore why people are leaving the church.
Mhm.
And he said, "You're interviewing too many people who have left the church." And I'm like, watch those interviews. They're the ones you'll learn why people are leaving. They often pontificate and postulate why people are leaving without actually talking to the people that are leaving.
I think there's Adventism is very, very centered on knowledge, and to actually get out and to experience things is almost looked down on. Experiences almost looked down on. It's got to come from the brain that God gave you, and you've got to no, it's got to be a combination.
Yeah.
God gave us feelings. God gave us emotions. God gave us look. My pet thing, because I've been a worship pastor for some years and involved in worship. Worship's got to be a head thing, but it's not worship if it stays in your head. It's got to be a heart thing.
Yeah.
And the first time worship, I'll just quickly put this out. The first time worship is mentioned in the Bible, Abraham is taking Isaac to sacrifice him, and he says to his servant, "Wait here while we go and worship."
Mm.
That's the first time it's mentioned in the Bible in Genesis. It says we're going to worship. Now, worship is sacrifice. You think about the Old Testament Jews, every time they worshiped, they went and sacrificed.
Mm.
Paul says in Romans 12, offer yourself as a living sacrifice. This is your true and acceptable worship. If worship doesn't come from sacrifice, then sacrifice has to be emotional. Jesus didn't hang on the cross without going through emotional agony.
Mm. Mm.
You can't sacrifice anything without feeling emotion.
Mm.
You can't sacrifice your money like it. You feel something.
Mm.
Sacrificially. It's okay to give $10 away. If you're going to, give a large portion of money away, you're going to be emotional about this.
Mm.
And sacrifice is what worship is all about. And that's why, that when I suppose in the churches I've been involved in, when we come and have corporate worship with singing, it's always presented in a way of, we're not just coming here to sing songs, we're coming here to sacrifice. We're here to sacrifice our heart to love on God because he first loved us. It's to get our emotions to connect with God on an emotional level, not just a head level. And that's what part of worship is about.
Yeah. Adventism is like template living a template, not temperate, template.
Template.
I don't know if you know those cookie cutters, and you'd make your dough and you'd put the cookie in. I often felt like a cookie cutter's coming down on me, but it's just going a little bit to the side, and it's half of me's hanging out, and half of me that's still in is trying to be pushed out into to fit the mold. And it's an interesting thing. And as I've said recently, there's not really a former Baptist fellowship or a former Anglican, but there's former Adventist, former Mormons,
probably former
JWs, yeah. And I think, yes, there's problems in every church, there's problems in every structure, every organization, as tiny as you would know from a open mic night group that meets once a month at the local whatever. As soon as you've got any kind of structure, humans are going to mess it up, guaranteed. But if you're claiming to be the remnant with a special message for the end time, revealing to the other planets and the angels and vindicating God by raising up a people that keep the commandments and honor the spirit of prophecy, you're not doing a very good job of it. And I think you've raised the bar for us to cast a critical eye on your movement. A couple more and then we'll have that break, and then we're going to come back with finishing off.
Just let me butt in. My earbuds, that I thought were fully charged, have just sent a message saying getting low. So I will charge those in a minute. If you lose me, that's what it's about.
You charge them when you're ready. I'm just going to read a couple more and then we'll have that break. Rose Power has written, indeed, the church should be helping people more than wasting money on looking good to its members. Yeah, there's a lot of... One thing that annoys me is I love well-produced stuff, I love that, but I love real lo-fi stuff too. I love authentic content, and I can't find any employed union or division level Adventist or conference level even, when they speak on social media publicly, I can't find any of them speaking without a script. It's all very look, there's a couple of people that don't fit that. I'll agree. Like people, I won't mention names, but I've got a great neighbour who speaks authentically and publicly, and I love that. But I'm talking generally speaking, collectively speaking. You'll watch them present some social media stuff, and it's just not authentic. It's scripted, and it's hi, how you going today? And I just think, and yeah, thanks Rose for that too. I think there's a lot of money wasted. Now a couple of quick things. Nikki Carlton is watching, and she's put, love it when you're talking about the buildings there. Buying church structures and only opening them a few hours a week is a waste of money. And I love Nikki does a regular weekly program. I'm just going to give it a quick plug on my group called Voice Life Fellowship. We're about to really start kicking things off there when I come back from the States. It's a group where we focus on finding the gems in the four Gospels, and there's several presenters that come on regularly, and she has a program once a week on a Friday evening. So those watching, go and just look on Facebook, Voice Life Fellowship. You'll find us, answer a couple of questions. We're going to really focus on providing online content there and ramping up the game by including more regular features. Just having a quick look here. Kimberly Green has replied to Stephen Beagle's people in bars don't judge like Adventists. I'm not sure I should bring this one up, but it could be politically alarming. Just a couple more and then we'll have a break. They will not reach out after Ted Wilson said, if you don't agree with the doctrines, leave. That's true. When I was a school teacher, thanks, Angela, we literally got a letter that was read out to the staff room from the GC down through the divisions. It went down through the unions, out into the conferences, out into the schools, into the pastors, teachers and pastors. And it said, if you don't agree with the fundamentals, please resign your post and your position. Okay, so let's have a short break. My very special guest is Hal Southwell. I'm enjoying our conversation. Hal, thank you so much for taking the time today.
A pleasure. I feel I might have been waffling a bit too much.
Not in the slightest. This program is about conversation. We're having a conversation. Yes, I love the relaxed vibe, and you have not waffled in the slightest. I assure you of that. I may have. And don't forget, everyone, if you're near Loma Linda and you want to come along to the Former Adventist Fellowship that I'm not organising, and I may only be having a little chat in a small side room, a breakaway group. So it's not some big official thing, but I'm going, and some people have funded my trip there. But I've asked if I can pay my own health insurance because I want to cover for everything if something goes wrong. I don't want to be stuck in a hospital paying $15,000 every 2 days. So that's going to cost me nearly 400 Australian, $397, and long-term car parks 200 and something as well. So I'm trying to raise a little bit of extra money. If you can do the old QR code there, scan it, and donate a few dollars. I tell you what, that will really help. Of my goal of 600 or 700 Australian to cover those extra costs, I think I've reached about 350 already. So thank you, everyone. Okay, we're going to have a short break, and then we'll be back to talk a little bit of theology with my very special guest, Hal Southwell. Get ready, charge up those earbuds.
I will.
And we'll be back to talk some Adventist theology. Is the Adventist gospel not only incorrect, is it anti-gospel? See you in a minute.
You love me so much more than I could ever know. Your love is deeper than this world will ever show. And all of life's beauty shines around this moment now. The sky and the cliffs, they seem to change my life somehow. And I will never be the same, will never be the same. Whoa, I will never be the same, never be the same ever again. Well, here I am waiting, Lord, my life is just for you. Please unfold all the plans that you would have me do. And if all the world's just a breath and nothing's here to stay, then all of the love we feel will save us anyway. And I will never be the same, will never be the same. Whoa, I will never be the same, will never be the same ever again. love me so much more than I could ever know. Your love is deeper than this world will ever show. And all of life's beauty shines around this moment now. The sky and the cliffs, they seem to change my life somehow. And I will never be the same, will never be the same. Whoa, I will never be the same, never be the same ever again. Well, here I am waiting, Lord, my life is just for you. Please Please unfold all the plans that you would have me do. And if all the world's just a breath and nothing's here to stay, and all of the love we feel will save us anyway. And I will never be the same, will never be the same. Whoa, I will never be the same, will never be the same ever again.
Hey, how you going? Welcome back. Just made it back in time. And my very special guest today is Hal Southwell. We're talking about his journey out of Adventism and how he's kept Jesus, the way, the truth, and the light as an iconic kind of theme or standard or belief, even back from the early days. So welcome back to part 2 in our chat today with Hal. And how's the earbuds going? Working all right?
Well, so far. I had no earbuds at all. I thought, how are we going to do this? And I whizzed out and bought some, and I had them going the other night. I thought, that's perfect. And 5 minutes before we came on, I put them on, and nothing was working. It threw me in a bit of a panic. Anyway, fortunately, you were panicking with your own problems at home.
I had my own issues. It's just the way of SDAQ&A. And during the break, I had quite a few people request to join Voice Life Fellowship, so that was exciting. A couple of people asked, what is it? And basically, it's a group that I started a while back where I wanted to find common ground, and I found common ground could be found in just the 4 Gospels. People can expand from that, but we provide, initially we're doing live meetings as well, but they're just so hard to coordinate. We're going to just go fully online. So if people want to join that, I'll just bring it up again. Go and look for Voice Life Fellowship. Love you to maybe even do a presentation for us one day. there, Hal. You just share something as long as it's from the four Gospels.
Sure.
And you can bring in commentary if you like, but I prefer people to keep it just the four Gospels,
Sure.
including some of their own thoughts. That'd be great. But we're building up a bunch of people that are going to be doing regular programs weekly. So, yeah, go and check that out. Now, a couple of questions in the break. Comments. Connie French has written, of course, Adventism, like so many Christian sects, is against the gospel because it teaches the individual as the agent of its own salvation with God. The gospel is that God is the agent of salvation, and he does it by resurrection from the dead. Yeah, I like that. The focus can be for Adventists and other sects that it's the individual is the agent of his own salvation. Now, a lot of Adventist, conservative, traditional Adventist apologists would say, no, that you allow God to come into your life and act upon your heart, and then the third party people watching on will see such a dramatic change in your life that looks to them like, and to the person and to God, that you are leading a sinless life. That's the nuanced thing there, and where they'll often say, no, we're not saying that it's not God doing it, not Jesus. But there still seems to be a leaning to the evidence has to show that you're producing good works more than the bad, and that's the key to your salvation. So just a couple of quick things. Don Roy. Hey, Don, good to have you watching, and congratulations on your recent PhD getting, and what, you're 80 now and you've just got another PhD, which I think is your third, maybe. Let us know, Don. And Don also was someone I interviewed in season 1, I think, on the original podcast. You can find that on all good podcast places, Spotify, elsewhere, iTunes. Very interesting interviews I had there with Don. Anyway, Don has said, hey, Peter, what are you hoping to achieve to your US trip? Okay, I'll answer that first. Just to meet up and connect with people and discuss their stories and just enjoy the fellowship, really. I'm not really someone that sets out in life with goals and plans and desires to achieve stuff. I just kind of wake up and go with the flow. I'm not saying that's the way it should be, but that's how my brain kind of allows me to live. But I'm going. I'm hoping to just meet up with some interesting people and have some great conversations. By the way, you sure you aren't adopting a cookie cutter approach in your own assessment of people and where they're at? I think they might add there. Look, maybe I value your input, so I will ponder that. I hope I'm not. I'm trying to find common ground. I don't think if you watch the over 300 interviews I've done that you would get a sense that I'm trying to push people into a cookie cutter, or that I'm actually assessing them from that perspective as well. I'm even probably leaning to kind of removing the cookie cutter altogether and just saying, here's the dough, there it is on the table, let's chat about it, let's make sense of it. But ultimately, I certainly would hope I'm not being that judgmental, but I'll ponder that. I appreciate your comment. Fred has written, Adventists run neck to neck with the Catholics in the sex abuse department and give the Baptists a run for their money in outright stealing from Medicare and overbilling. They were convicted $400 million. Wow.
Oh.
I want to fact check that. George has said, Peter, after coming to Loma Linda, you will never be the same again. George, how far is Las Vegas? How far are you from Loma Linda? I hope we're going to catch up. It'd be awesome. Cindy Lewis said, where does the GC get its money? There must be another conversation there. There's a couple I won't bring up, but they are funny. Okay, so let's look at. And by the way, Don, if you're still watching, unless you've just dropped in, watched a little bit, and dropped out, you should come back on the program again. I'd love to discuss that topic that you just raised. Yeah, I think that would be a good one. So we're looking at the Adventist gospel. How does it differ, do you think, Hal, from the gospel of the Bible, and tease into the sanctuary doctrine, 1844, some of these dates? You know, we chatted about overall they're irrelevant when you're wanting to just help community and build community and live a life that's one of giving and sharing and helping. But, you know, let's put our hats on for looking at this theologically, because I think there's potential mental, emotional, spiritual harm that can come to someone if they fully adopt some of these Adventist doctrines. So it's worth talking about if we're going to be a little bit of a lighthouse for them. So hand it over to you. What's the difference between the Adventist gospel and the Bible gospel? Just a little question.
What have we got? Another 4 hours? Look, I suppose the Adventist gospel, to me, looking back, you got to remember that I basically had left Adventism before the 90s. In the 1990, I tried going back to an Adventist church a few times, as I said, when I first moved to Hobart. So it's all just tied up with how it's a long way back for me.
Yes.
So, but I am aware that the Adventist doctrine is the Adventist gospel is also, well, it depends if you're talking about a traditional Adventist,
I know,
or gospel Adventist.
Yeah, I'm wanting to go more the traditional Adventist, because the progressive gospel liberal Adventist is kind of a whole other denomination.
Yeah,
and they have worked out a really kind of gospel biblical centered message that, you know, even Des Ford was including Ellen White in that to a degree.
Yeah.
So I think let's go what is the church standing by, whether it's traditional or not. What is the official? It's hard to find the official statement
That's
of
right.
their beliefs because it's so watered down, and you know, it's like watching one of those tricks with the 3 cups, and there's a little ball and they're moving around, and it's just hard to get a really clear view. But, you know, generally speaking, we can assess what the Adventist doctrine is on the sanctuary and what it is not.
Part of
I
the
think
problem
leave the
with
Adventist gospel guys separate to that.
Yeah, okay. So part of the traditional view of the gospel from Adventism is tied up in a number of things, and I just want to bring the Ellen White thing in. Adventist view on being a prophet is very different to what most churches would call the gift of prophecy. I remember being with the Baptist church, and there were people there with a prophetic gift. Oh my goodness. But no one treated them like a prophet or treated them any differently to anyone else. In fact, I remember being at that Baptist church and people being prayed for after the service with illnesses or struggles or emotional problems, and the pastor saying, "Guys, this is not a pastor's issue. These people up here have issues that all of us can pray for. Get up here." And the church would get behind people. And there was never a sense that, well, those people with a prophetic gift get up here. That we're all called to administer the gospel to others
More
and
like
to love on others.
like the spirit of prophecy is descended upon that generation of Christians, not descending upon individuals so much. It's a collective spirit of prophecy pouring out kind of thing.
And some people have a very powerful gift in that area, but it's never outside of Adventism. It's never treated as though you look at what they have to say against the Bible and make theology out of it. It's the whole idea of the spirit of prophecy with Adventism is a completely different thing to the gift of prophecy in the churches that I've ever been involved in outside of Adventism. It's two different things. So the whole E.G. White issue within Adventism is, look, if she's a prophet of God, great. I don't have a problem with that. Did everything she do, was it everything she did was moral, 100% right, sinless? Of course not. Did she plagiarize? Yes. Was she problematic? Yes. If you take any other prophet outside of Adventism, that's not a problem. Well, if they're a prophet, you don't look to them for any guidance. You go to the Bible. And a prophet's role is really to encourage and build up the church, where the church is at, not to bring new light or to bring, if there's doctrinal issues that you think are new, you don't go to these prophets to get their interpretation of it, because they can interpret what God wants for you. It's not like that in other churches. So Adventists have got that perspective. So their understanding of the gospel is so tightly tied up with, this spirit of prophecy that was from God, that it's hard to, and of course the gospel Adventists have moved away from that sort of perspective, but it's very, very difficult to get away from if you're going to follow E.G. White. There's so much, the stuff about that your name could come up in the judgment any time, and have you asked for forgiveness for all your sins this morning in case your name comes up? Like, what sort of a way is that to live? I'm a child of God. I'm an heir to the kingdom. He loves me as a father loves a child. My father was a strict traditional Adventist, born in 1906, so he came from a completely different culture. I got a good thrashing when I deserved it, and even when I didn't sometimes, mainly because I deserved it. But it came from a completely different era. But there was never a time when I was, I'd done stuff and I was bad, that he wanted to ostracize me from the family.
Yeah.
It wasn't, oh, you've done right this today, so, you can be part of the family, but you've done wrong, here, so, you can't be part of the family. God is a father. He loves us. And when we do go off in our own way, and I remember when I did leave home, and I wasn't an Adventist, Dad knew, I never had to tell him. He knew. But, he still loved me, even though he had all those traditional views. And then even when I started to come back to church and start questioning, and, he still loved me. He still loved me. He couldn't say it. He was from a generation that didn't say it. He never said that until very late in life. I knew I had to tell him I loved him, and I went to see him. He was quite unwell with his asthma. He'd been moved up to, because they were in a little unit at the Avondale old people's folks' homes there, and then he'd moved to the little hospice, the hospital part. He'd moved to there, and I said to him, I said, Dad, I love you. And the next time I saw him, he said to me, "Oh, son, I love you." So he was never able to say it until but he always loved me. God is like that, where traditional Adventism doesn't teach that sort of love of God. There is no security. Now, people will argue, oh, yes, there is, and they'll make up a word salad around it. But if you were to tie in everything E.G. White says about the sanctuary doctrine and try and then, how do I live my life? You're living on a knife's edge in many ways. And I know people who live like, in fact, I know I started living like that. Yeah. And it was, it's soul destroying. It doesn't build you up as a person. It doesn't give you the ability to love on your neighbor who doesn't care about God. It doesn't build you up in any way. You're living under some sort of a shadow of fear. And I know there's traditional Adventists who will argue that they don't live under that, but it's certainly my experience. And looking on from the outside, and particularly, I suppose, I sort of hadn't been to an Adventist church for several years before I went back in 1990 and started going to an Adventist church in Hobart. I went to a few here, and whoa, it was, I suppose, from moving away, coming back, it was not frightening. It was just painful to see people living like that. It was just like, this just grieves my soul. It grieves, and it must grieve God. I just feel sometimes when I see it and I talk about it, I just feel God's heart must be broken to think that people live that way, feeling that every sin is looked at, every deed is looked at, the books are open and they look at every secret thing they've done in their life. No, you're an heir to the kingdom. Like you're a son, you're a daughter of God. He loves you. It's not a love that if you walk away from it, that you are still saved. But it's a love that if you stay in that family and you stay in that relationship, through the ups and downs of life, you're covered. And traditional Adventism doesn't teach that. It teaches you much more fear than that. And the beautiful thing about the true gospel that says you are an heir to the kingdom, you believe in me, you have passed from death unto life. You are, you'd have eternal life. When you grasp that and you understand how much God loves you, and I think the biggest challenge for any person is to understand how much God loves them. Like, honestly, how much are you loved? That changes your life. When you know you're fully accepted, warts and all, whether you can get up on stage and sing a song beautifully, or whether you start and you realize you haven't got your cape on, God still loves you.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
and it's just a beautiful thing to be involved with other people that understand that and just love you the same way.
Yes, because they reflect
And
that. They reflect
reflect
their
back
connection with God back to
in the
you,
same way.
whereas Adventists are feeling judged, and so they're reflecting that judgment on you as well.
Yeah,
But what are they?
absolutely.
I guess I'm trying to. And I'm so glad you've said that, because what you've just said, you've encapsulated, which we needed to do first, the gospel that according to the Bible. So if
Mm.
you're a Christian and you're following the gospel taught clearly in the Bible, what you've just said is what it is. What is, and it's funny, lately I've been saying, when I say the investigative judgment, I stumble on the words. And the reason is my daughters watch a TV show called The Investigators, and it's
Yeah.
about a team of high school kids that are investigators, and they're the best of
Okay.
and they're just kids. And so when
Investigate.
I say investigative judgment, I just keep stumbling. That is, people have been asking me why I keep stumbling on it. That's why. But the investigative judgment, the unique doctrine, what on earth is it? Like, I think I know. I think I could sit here and say, this is what Adventists collectively, the big picture, this is their special message. This is their unique message. But I can't seem to find any consensus on it.
Well,
What
I
did
can't
you think
find
it
an
was when you were young? What did you think it was? What was going on? So you're in your 20s, you're an Adventist
yeah.
again, and you are confused. You think, how does this fit in? But you were able to say, you're able to ask, how does it fit in? Because it was pretty clear what the Adventist church taught. What did they teach you then? What was the sanctuary doctrine? What was going on with this whole idea of, okay, Jesus is coming back very soon. Be ready. 1844. There's a new judgment. He's judging the dead. Then he's going to get onto the living.
Yeah. Well,
How,
that was exactly what I understood. That in 1844, Jesus moved into the Holy of Holies and started judgment. He opened the books, the passage, the books were open and, is used. And the dead were judged, and any moment the living will be judged. And your name could come up at any moment. And then when the book is closed, end of probation. Could be in 2 minutes from now.
see
There's
what?
anything you've done wrong, and that book is closed. I'm sorry, but you're out.
Yeah, whether whatever you do now, nothing's going to change the decision. But then another thing happens down the track soon after, within weeks or months. Jesus removes his intercessory power. But if you've already been judged or not, what's the point of then having to stand and demonstrate this new little last minute tweak that God says, okay, all of you that have been judged, not judged, those who have been found wanting, forget about it. You're gone. Those that have been, you're in, you're getting to heaven. But now there's one last little test. Here we are. There's a little lull in the whole proceedings. No intercessor. Demonstrate to God, the angels, the other planets, even though you have officially been saved,
Yeah.
that you can now live a sinless life for a few days or a few months or whatever.
That part
Prove
of it
that you can. Like what?
That part of it is the most bizarre part of the whole
Yeah.
thing. I mean, where did that come from? Where is that in scripture? Like, it's just bizarre. And I don't even think I never heard my dad expound on that.
Yeah.
I don't think that he actually believed that last bit.
No, they
But
tend to stop at the probation part. But the reality is when you look at it, and I've analyzed it so
yes,
deeply in the last few months,
no, you're right. It
another
is. It's
little
there.
bit.
Yeah, it is. There's this little bit that, yeah, by then you have to live on your own without intercessor. Yeah, that's right.
And so if you've already, so those are the people that have been saved. So they've been found, yet your sins, God was working through you. You were able to lead a sinless life. You've been saved. Your probation's closed. Nothing you can do now makes a difference. You're already saved or you're not. Okay, so the ones that are saved, why then go a little while later, now prove it to everybody? Okay, we're watching, no Jesus, nothing. So that means that they've got another chance of not being saved.
Yeah,
Is
it
that right?
means the proof of their salvation is on them and not on Jesus that it's
I
supposed to be on.
know.
Like
Yes.
that's where the whole
That's
anti-gospel
interesting.
stuff starts to
That's
come in.
interesting. Yes.
Because
Yeah, I
as
hadn't
soon as
thought of
you
that.
take and it's the exactly the same problem exists when people have this: we are saved by grace plus what we do. It takes part of the centrality of Jesus and puts it on you.
Yeah.
And
So that
honestly,
yeah.
everything has to be Jesus. Sorry, go on.
No, I was just going to say that surely there's no Adventist apologist that can run from that. If I've assessed it properly and I've been following Dennis Priebe and all these guys, and that's what they say it is, and that's what Ted Wilson says it is, and that's what Ellen White says it is in the Great
Yeah,
Controversy. If that happens, what you are really doing is saying, okay, Jesus worked through you, grace, righteous by faith, all of that. Yep, okay, he led you to lead a sinless life. We don't agree with that, but okay, he did, and you led a sinless life. You're going into heaven, but this one little extra. Here's the final proof now, everybody. I've got this group of people that are sinless. You watch them remain sinless now that we take Jesus out of the equation. You watch, everybody, and they will be able to. So there's one extra little test there that is 100% based on the individual. There's no escaping that.
yeah.
And that's why Adventism and Adventists can be called legalistic, because of that last little moment in this history of the end times.
And that's why you can't call Adventist
No,
mainstream
no,
Christianity,
no.
because
Yeah,
the gospel is tied up in so many knots and so many. Yeah, there's it's just I find it so bizarre having lived away from it for so long now, and to think back to that and to think back to that way of thinking is
yeah, yes,
yeah, it grieves me. I said it before. It does. It grieves me that you're so tied up in that. And
yeah,
the thing is, the freedom you get in understanding that you're an heir of the kingdom is a freedom that pushes you to Christ. Not, people say, "Oh, it's just giving you a blue license to sin." No, it doesn't do that at all. It's the
no,
opposite of
no,
that.
no, no.
It's the dead opposite of that. Yeah. So
Mm.
um, it's a funny thing as you walk. Um, if you're in an old house and it's been done up a bit, and you think, "Oh, this is nice," but then you go through a door and this has been done up, even fresher and newer, and it's got new carpet, new paint. You think, "Oh, this is nicer than the old." You've gone through that door. You don't want to, you wouldn't want to live back in there. Then you go out, and then there's this brand new part, and it's lavish. You think, "Well, wow, I don't want to go back through that door." And these coming through, I don't know, coming through and out of Adventism is a bit like that. It's like, going back to that. It's just such a sad thing. You wouldn't go back through that door into
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if that's a good analogy, but anyway.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Once you can't unsee some things, and one of the things I enjoy about these kind of conversations is like I've learned some stuff today that I've been struggling with, just trying to untangle, just because we're having a conversation. And I hope the people watching and engaging with that conversation are also getting to have some epiphanies here and there as well. I mean, the gospel person that is believing in the biblical gospel that Jesus taught isn't going to come to any kind of probation type conclusions anyway. They're not even going to come to, oh, God's going to work through me so that I can lead a sinless life, and so they're not even going to come to that point. That just that last little bit that we chatted there, really, thank you. It kind of, some things you said helped to cement it in my mind that's where it's anti-gospel, because it's saying that, yep, looks, all the apologists can breathe all whatever they can, polish it up right to the end, but you cannot say that Adventism doesn't teach that there will be a moment without the intercessor where your fate is already decided, where you have to do one more test on your own without Jesus. And you may still not get into heaven based on your following actions. So it's just, and like you said, your father probably didn't even think that. I don't even think most Adventists grasp that.
No.
I've only just now myself started going, hang on,
that's what's
that's
taught.
one
That's
last
right.
little thing there.
Yeah, no, it's definitely. In fact, I have people on Facebook that are Adventists put up things, and I've seen that. I've seen that even in this day and age of people that are, that there'll be a time when we stand without an intercessor.
Yeah. And not only that, it's a time when you stand without an intercessor after you have already been
what's that?
judged or not, like after you've already, you're not going to prison, but as you're walking out the gate, there's one last little trick
Nice test.
And
And the funny,
I think they claim that as the big important one, because Satan allegedly said that humans cannot live with freedom of choice and choose a sinless path and live a sinless path. So you have to remove the intercessor and allow humans to stand on their own if you're taking that stance.
however,
Have to. If I don't
didn't
agree with them.
Jesus do that exactly?
That's why they then say it can be done. Whereas I would suggest that the Christian would say, Christ was the perfect lamb, the perfect sinless human, because that's what you need for a sacrifice, not as an example of how to live.
Exactly. Yep. Yeah. So there's many things within Adventism that make the centrality and the importance of Jesus smaller.
Yes.
Rather than lifting it on a pedestal and saying, "Look at Jesus." And that's why I wanted to say Jesus is the way, the truth, and life as a bit of an intro or a heading to what we're talking about, because that's got to be central with everything, in my opinion. And I I went, I think I mentioned I'd been to a Salvation Army church, and then I got quite involved with the Baptists here in Hobart, and I never heard a message about Baptist theology.
No.
And the whole time I was there, there was never a message about Baptist theology. It was always about the gospel and the centrality of Jesus. And there was a time, by the way, I should say, I've been to various churches, and I've been to Hillsong conferences, and I've been to all sorts of, I've been to different denominations, from, what people are often called charismatic to Baptists, and I've been to Anglican churches, had a very good friend who was an Anglican minister for a while. Oh, he retired, sorry. But I don't. We're going to any of these churches. You don't hear doctrine preached.
Yeah,
You
interesting.
don't hear doctrine preached. You hear the gospel preached. It's always. It makes whatever the message is. It brings to a point where Jesus is lifted up at the end. It's always Jesus is bigger out of it. And it was all that preached. But the Baptist church, what I was going to say is the Baptist church I went to was probably the most charismatic church I've ever been to, as far as, like strange things happening. I remember that a young 14, 15-year-old boy with a broken foot that was a school kid, and he kept on walking, and it got worse and worse, and he was in a lot of trouble to a point where they'd stopped him using a moon boot and crutches because he kept putting his weight on it and it wasn't healing. And he was in a lot of pain with it, and they'd got a wheelchair for him and basically said, do not get out of that wheelchair because, broken bones in the foot, you can't fix them they're difficult. And it wasn't healing, and they kept on trying to get it into place and saying, put a moon boot on it, but it kept on re-breaking, Anyway, we had an evening church service, and the pastor said, just play the music quietly and we'll just pray for a few people. And there were people in the congregation just praying for people. And there was probably I was just playing some music, and probably 2 or 3 rows back was this young boy with his broken foot, and one of the congregation just started praying for him. And the next thing, he jumped up, he ripped up his moon boot, and this church had a concrete floor with carpet glued direct. It wasn't a soft carpet. He was leaping around the building, leaping. And it was just quiet. No one was making a big fanfare, and everyone treated it as though, that's normal. And it was a real eye-opener to me. And what I'm trying to say is where you preach the gospel and you preach Jesus, things happen. Things happen, and no one makes a big fuss of it because it's like, oh, well, we've seen that before. It was pretty amazing for me Another time, a young girl had come forward for prayer, and she was on the ground and she was going through awful contortions, and the pastor walked past and he said, get out of her now in the name of Jesus. She had honestly had some sort of a demonic, effect. He just said that as he walked past and kept walking, and this is without a word of a lie, she was on the ground, then she just went out straight on the ground like a rolling pin, and she rolled like a rolling pin at a speed that was not normal, stopped and instantly didn't stop and then start rolling. She just went and then she just laid flat on the ground and it was over. I've never seen anything like that, put the hairs on the back of your neck up, but people just treated it as normal. He just prayed, he said, he just said, come out of her in the name of Jesus, and kept walking to the next person. It was no big deal. We started worship, and this, unbeknownst to me, found all this out later, a guy in his mid to late 40s, I'd say, a travelling rep he was, so I found out later, but he'd been past our church because it was on the back of our church was on a highway. He'd been past there numerous times, and the story was he was going past one day and he heard God say, go to church, go to that church. Well, anyway, so unbeknownst to us, we started playing some songs at the beginning of the service, and he walked in, he got through the front, the doors into the auditorium, and he went bang on the ground. He couldn't get up. No one prayed for him, no one said anything. He just couldn't get up, and he crawled himself to a seat, and he started blubbering, and he was bawling his eyes out. And, we all found out sometime later, he, kept coming back. He said, I know after the service, he was still sitting there, and he couldn't actually get out of his seat. He's going, what's happened to me? What's happened? He was freaking out. We're saying, and everyone's saying, oh, no, right, it's just God. He's just doing a thing on you. Just bask in it and accept him. And he accepted Jesus right there and there. No one prayed some great. He got baptized and he became a Christian. And that nothing freaky like that ever happened to him again that I've heard of. So where the gospel is preached, these things didn't happen all the time every Sunday. But where the gospel is preached and Jesus is raised up, things, God makes things happen. He builds the church. It's not us. It's not our programs. It's not our preaching. He builds the church. And it wasn't this person's prayer over the young guy with a foot. It was God that healed him. It was just someone from the congregation just praying over him quietly. So anyway, that's my where Jesus is lifted up, things happen.
Yeah, there's growth, there's creativity, there's expansion, there's love.
There's love and acceptance of all people. We've got lovely, lovely old people in our church, and the youth. They often have their youth programs, but they've organised things to go and help mow the old people's home or weed their garden and do stuff. It's not part of a program. It's just that the youth pastor's going, "Oh, guys, let's do that this week," and so off they go and do that. Like all this spontaneity is what I love about the gospel, and that's the same with creative people. There's songs being written just daily from artists all over the world that are Christians. There, why are they doing that?
Yeah.
We've got people in our church. There's two girls from a same family, and they write beautiful songs, beautiful worship songs. They don't make any money out of it.
No.
But why do they do that? Because they already got a passion for God. They don't come to one day in the week and stop and meditate on God. It's just out of their life.
It's
flows.
outflowing. Yeah, it flows.
Just flows
Yeah,
out.
yeah, yeah. Yeah.
Now, I've probably got away from theology and onto...
No, we've covered deeply the theology I wanted to. In fact, I had some epiphanies because of our discussion, and I'm interested in anyone that's watching that is a traditional Adventist, if they'd be interested in coming on the show and saying I'm wrong, saying what it is. I'd like any Adventist pastor. I'd put out a challenge to any currently employed Adventist ordained pastor to come on the show and tell me what the sanctuary doctrine is. And they won't, because they know, A, they don't potentially even know what it is, and B, they want to be so careful not to say the wrong thing, because their job will be in jeopardy. I've seen people call out the last generation theology, but they won't defend it publicly because they're too scared.
And I think that's a really sad indictment of the way the organisation is led.
Isn't it?
I mean, the Baptist Church is not led from the top. Each Baptist church is independent completely. The only time they can get some help, if they're really in some financial trouble, they can go to the Baptist Union, and the Baptist Union might. In fact, I've seen this actually occur when I was in the Baptist church. There were some financial things that were really problematic, and they said, "Well, it's not a Baptist Union. It's a local church problem. It's all yours." They have to support themselves. They're on their own.
Yeah,
they get a little bit of help if it's absolutely catastrophic, and the same with the ACC church groups that I'm with. Our church is our church. We've got 150 people that come probably regularly, probably a few more on the books, but we've got to support ourselves financially. If we lose our pastor, we've got to try and find another pastor. We've got to it's our eldership. I'm on the board there now. It'd be our board if our pastor left, or if he fell into, if he had a falling of some description. I know he won't, but I love him. But if there was a problem, it would be our board would have to reach out nationally to some of the leaders that are called national leaders, and that's why they're there, so they can put some feelers out to others, and they're in the know of different things. But there's not a big structure that we're afraid of.
Yeah. Well, the reality is, it's not rocket science. It's not brain surgery. I nearly said rocket surgery. It's. I love what you said earlier about the tent maker type pastor too. I think a lot of pastoral work can be done without being paid for it, particularly if you set up kind of a community that's kind of self-running.
Pastor I've got at the moment, not all my pastors have been tent makers, but the pastor I've got at the moment runs a small web business on the side to facilitate. Help his growing family, keep the lights on and home and the food on the table.
Yeah. But I mean, I for fun, I put into an AI chat thing the other day, a few months ago now. I wrote it took me 1 minute. I said, write me a sermon based on the 4 Gospels, include texts, give us some of the highlights of Jesus' teachings, give it a positive angle, and make it last, if I read it, for 30 minutes. That's all I did. Boop.
Yeah.
10 seconds later, comes
Yeah.
back an incredible sermon.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have even had to edit it.
Perfect.
And I'm thinking there, I could become a pastor.
Exactly.
1 minute, got my sermon for the week. Go and hang out with people, organize people to do some house visits. And I'm kind of joking about it, and I totally get when people are paid to do the job. Great.
Yeah,
But
I don't have a problem with it either.
yeah, but I think in the States, I read a stat somewhere that 1 in 2 Adventists in North America are church employed
Oh, goodness.
in some capacity. Now, I might be wrong, but I remember
Mm.
listening to that and going, "What?"
Mm.
The Adventist church is definitely top heavy.
Oh,
I remember I lived in New Zealand for a while, and I was friends with someone whose father was the accountant for the Baptists in New Zealand, the whole of New Zealand,
yeah,
and there were only 4 administrators for the whole of New Zealand.
yeah.
They had pastors, of course, in each church,
Well, I
and
think
he was one of them, and he was an Adventist. He was the accountant.
yeah. Well, I think there's two. Well, when I was with the Baptists, I think there was two at the Baptist Union of Tasmania that ran. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Now we're going to
So,
look at some comments, and then I'll get you just to wrap up with a couple of thoughts. Had a great conversation today. My very special guest today is Hal Southwell, and I've loved your comments in our Facebook group SDAQ&A. Hal, you've put some really good thoughts there, and created some really great conversations. So you're a valued member of the group, and just a quick one. Don did write back. What did he say there? Don, he's writing from hospital at the moment. He's had a
oh,
back bear. Sorry to hear that, Don. Yeah, you get well. If there's anything we can do, let us know. Now, George has just written, so I'll just bring up a couple of things before we say farewell. George has said Hebrews completely debunks the 1844
yeah.
IJ heresy. I caught up with a friend yesterday. He has got every single Plain Truth and Verdict magazine in that era
Oh,
of, I don't know, late 70s into the 80s that George Burnside produced. And he's a Baptist as well. He showed me yesterday, we caught up, and one of the Plain Truths, so one of the early magazines, and it's in 2 parts, the one magazine, and it's about the gospel, part 1 and 2. And he was holding up like this to me. I took, I'll take a photo. I'll see if it's far away. I took a photo of it. Yeah, there's he and I, thumbs up.
yeah.
Present truth. I think I said plain truth. Present
Yeah.
truth.
Present truth. Yeah.
And look at him beaming. He loves it. He he has got every single magazine, and he said he has never read the gospel so clearly and accurately portrayed. So the Adventist Church had some opportunities through the years with Brinsmead and a heap of others, and Des Ford, to really grasp the gospel. What made me think of it is George said about Hebrews, and that particular magazine was all about Romans. There's these moments, and I said to him, "Is Ellen White mentioned in that at all?" He said, "No, no, don't know anything about her." And he was surprised to find out that it was a kind of a former Adventist that had put this
Mm.
together. So yeah, I don't know. What are your thoughts on that? You were there around the Glacier View time. Missed opportunity, do you think, or did the church do the right thing in protecting their property?
Well, I, the whole problem is, as you said, it's top heavy, and there's a whole heap of things they've got to protect. Um, well, their jobs. There's thousands of people employed.
Mhm.
There's all these buildings. There's all these churches, and there's the reputation of those that are up in the hierarchy. You know, all of that has got the chance to crumble and fall if they don't hang on to those traditional views. So they're going to fight tooth and nail, and that's why I think Adventism, unfortunately, I think because there's such a strong stream of traditionalists with Adventism that it's sort of a bit doomed as far as a denomination is concerned that's going to be relevant. Doesn't mean that Adventists are lost people. They're part of, they're heirs of the kingdom the same. It's just that the organisation has so many flaws that to live a fulfilling Christian life is very difficult in the Adventism compared to what I feel I have discovered in life.
Yeah.
The fact that when I felt God turned a light switch on for me at one stage, and I know why I'm here.
And yet, what I've discovered in these interviews is that people like Don, who I respect immensely, is obviously a little bit triggered that I'm criticizing Adventism, and has said so in the past. I'm not revealing anything new. And that guy that was high up in their union, you haven't done yourself any favors now, Pete, interviewing former Adventists, and there's a kind of a part of their brain that is, surely they can look at some of this theology and go, that is absolute rubbish, but they're still defending. So it's what I'm saying is that it's still a dynamic, growing denomination, and every kind of Adventist is supporting it. Like you cannot criticize. There's a certain level they even look smug when they go, oh yes, I've questioned a bit of that and I've put that over here, and oh, I said this to this leader once and he thought I meant that. Oh, there's a certain level of smug, pious holy ground sometimes that some of them take. But the reality is they're all ensuring that it stays together and is quite vibrant and is growing. It's a very interesting denomination. Don also said what I hope to achieve by going to Former Adventist Fellowship in LA next week. Don, if I went, and I love Star Trek, if I went to the Star Trek convention in LA, would you ask me what do I hope to gain from that?
Right.
I would just love chatting to interesting people, and Adventism is like a Star Trek convention for me. 2 times a week I get to chat about this stuff. It's awesome.
Well, I've taken a bit of interest since I came across your program, and I think I questioned a few times early when I first started watching, why are you doing this?
Right.
And I think you gave me a very good response. I thought, okay, that's a good response. That's great that you're doing that, and I think you should keep doing it. But initially thought, well, why are you hashing this stuff? It's just like what I remember going to in the 90s when I first moved to Hobart and was trying to go back to an Adventist church, and we went to a Adventist camp that was on in the summer. The camps we have, and there was a doctor of theology, and he was there doing a whole series on the investigative judgment. Well, I waited around after one of the programs, and a great lot of people trying to talk to him. I waited until no one was around so that he wouldn't be embarrassed or by asking these questions. I said to him, look, great, you're talking about all this investigative judgment. If I was to say to you that when you get to heaven, you find out that all that is wrong, and it's really completely wrong, are you going to be saved, and are you going to go to heaven? And he said, yeah. And I said, well, on the other hand, if I don't believe it, and it is true, if it is true and I don't believe it, am I going to heaven? And he said, yeah, you are. And I said, so why are you taking all this time, energy, and obviously you've spent hours and hours of research on this and getting prepared for it, and you've taken up all this a whole camp meeting. I don't know what they went for a week, didn't they? One Sabbath to another Sabbath or something. Anyway, whatever the camps used to go for.
That's
was
right.
Running every day. I'm thinking all this effort on something that has got nothing to do with my salvation or nothing to do with my relationship with Jesus, nothing that can help me help my neighbour, nothing that teaches me how to love others that might not be so kind to me. Like none of that. I just think, well, and that's what I said to him. So why is it relevant? And he was just absolutely silent. And he stood there for a while and he said, well, it's, and he said exactly like that. Well, it's a cornerstone of Adventism. And I said,
Yeah.
well, so what? Why would it be?
Yeah.
Why isn't Jesus the cornerstone? He said, oh, no, Jesus is the cornerstone. Yes, no. Jesus and the gospel is the cornerstone. And I said, so why are we talking about this? And he waffled and waffled. And then he finally said, well, I think it's still relevant.
Yeah.
And that
Yeah.
was the best answer he
He's
could give
being
me.
disingenuous, wasn't he? Really, because he deep down would be thinking, "No, you're not saved, brother." That's what he'd be
Yeah,
thinking.
probably.
Really, yeah. Hey,
Possibly.
we're gonna wrap it up with a couple of quickies here. Cindy Lou has said, Cindy Lou Wu, serious question. If Jesus Christ in his humanoid form did not have the capacity to sin, or Adventists call it propensity, what was the point of the devil tempting him? Well, traditional Adventists say he did have the propensity to sin and proved that you didn't have to. I don't know what the gospel people teach. Isn't that sad that I don't know? I'm pretty sure they believe he was I know Des Ford doesn't believe he had the propensity to sin, I think. If Gillian's watching, she can correct me on that. But I think the whole point is that a pure lamb was to be sacrificed. And even a pure lamb may be potentially attacked by a wolf or whatever, but it is protected. It's in its safe place. Whether the tempting is going to work or not isn't really the point. There's the sacred lamb that was crucified.
I think the general Christian worldview is that Jesus Christ was all God and all man, not half and half. He was all both.
Yeah.
And he had to choose to forego his divinity to be that perfect lamb for us, even to the point of going on the cross and bearing the pain and not using any of his divinity to numb some of that pain.
Mm. And I love that moment where he says, I think, Father, why have you forsaken me? There's doubt as well. I love that.
Exactly. Yeah.
George has just written his brother passed away today, age 87. Sorry to hear that, George. Really sorry to hear that.
Yeah, that's.
Hope you're holding up okay. Angela has written, if you think about it, people die every day. So when is Jesus ever finishing the judgment on the dead? So funny you say that, Angela. I literally was driving along yesterday thinking that, because a few people locally have passed, and I thought, wow, they've lived their whole life. God, did he get to them or not? But now they're dead. So when is this moment? When's the moment going to happen? When he moves from the dead to the living? Or does he do a bit of both? I'm judging a little bit of the dead still over here. Haven't quite. Oh, there's someone died. Right, I didn't get to him, so he's still on the dead list. I'll judge him tomorrow. But we've got the living. I'm not being. What's the word? Not trying to.
So then you start coming up with all these ideas that make sense to an Adventist. Yeah. I know.
That's the part of it that I'm laughing at, not the judgment. Yeah, good point. Okay, we're going to wrap it up. What do we got here? Just checking the Rose Power. Now, Rose, are you watching? I've asked several times, is this Rose Lee Power that I know, or is this Rose Power someone else? I had that same conversation with Andy Mack where I thought it was someone else, same name. The average SDA is ignorant of its history and theological details, not sure that will change ever. Yeah, so true. And yet, unless that is corrected, unless the leadership takes responsibility in having open conversations about this, authentic open conversations, you're going to still go to your churches and find them divided. Adventist churches are divided. There's two Adventists in one. There's the gospel Adventist, with subgroups, we know that. And then there's the traditional Adventist, who's way more unified in their belief. And they just hobble each other. You guys are just holding each other back constantly. And then when anyone says, hey, let's talk about it, let's critique it. Whoa, hang on, you've gone too far. You haven't done yourself any favors there, Pete.
That's right. Shot yourself in the foot there, Peter.
Yes. Funny what you said. I do remember that one of the first conversations we had where you said, "What on earth are you doing this?" And I welcome that. It's one of my most asked questions because I'm, as I've said several times, I'm kind of largely deconstructed and trying to build myself up on the simplest common ground I can. But I often in life, I just remember I was working 9 to 5 and I thought, no, I want to be a full-time musician. I'm going to go and do it. And everyone said, why are you doing that? And that's irresponsible and all this kind of stuff. I fail to fully grasp why people are concerned of the motive of why someone is doing something. I don't know. There's a whole lot of other things I do besides SDAQ&A, which I also love and immerse myself in. I'm not even sure why I'm talking about it now, but it's an interesting thing because when people say it to me, I think, I don't really know.
Well, I brought it up.
Yeah, yeah,
That's why you're talking about it,
yeah,
because I brought
yeah,
up in one of our first conversations, well,
that's
one of my
right. Yeah,
first messages to you.
yeah. And
Yeah,
I would feel that kind of question every week, 1 or 2
yeah.
times.
I brought it.
I'm not even saying don't ask. I'm not saying that it's not a relevant question.
Hmm.
Um, and hopefully I did answer it. But
No, you did. You did
yeah,
really well.
yeah. But
I mean,
I
wasn't quite sure whether you were trying to doing this program to support the traditional view, or
right.
to just bring it
Ah,
out into the open. And when I started to realise you're bringing it out in the open, I thought, well, why bother? Like, it's over, it's
yeah,
dusted, like done and for
yeah,
me,
yeah,
it had been done and dusted so
yeah,
long ago.
yeah, yeah,
I'm thinking it doesn't really matter in the scheme of salvation. Doesn't matter in the scheme of my relationship or anyone's relationship with
yeah,
God.
yeah,
It's what they believe. They can believe for all they like, and it might be right. If it's right and I get to heaven, great.
yeah,
I don't
yeah,
care.
yeah,
And you know
yeah,
what? God doesn't care,
yeah,
because He's so big. There's going to be so much that all of us don't understand. He's so, like, we've
yeah,
got to get this realization
yeah.
that our truth is not the truth.
I know. We're
It's
gonna be
just so
very
small,
surprised, or
very
not at
surprising.
all.
Anyway,
Yeah, and I think I also noticed that all my life, if you raise a touchy topic, you're instantly shut down. All my life, I've noticed that. Even when I was 7, asking questions in Sabbath school, I could just notice this feeling of no, don't go there. Oh,
don't
good
go
on you.
there. Yeah.
Yeah, and I discovered with social media, you can just no one can stop me. Yeah, they can do things and they can put copyright bans and annoying stuff. And I've lost lots of gigs because of it too. So yeah, there's things that people can do, but I'm just thinking how great we can have a platform where I can interview a really conservative Adventist and just say, hey, what does it tell me? What does that mean? And I can interview someone like yourself that's left or someone that's an academic, and they're all sharing their ideas. I'm not trying to push any one of those ideas, but I love that all those ideas are there and we can do 2 things. We can take it or leave it, or we can find common ground. I mean, you and I have got a heap of common ground with music and the,
That
community
journey.
building and the journey and even some of the locations and people.
Mm.
Um, that's great common ground, and I think it's
Yeah.
important for a healthy society and denomination to be more focused on the common ground, the good things they can do for community. But I think they need to reveal their varied truths. And so I guess for me with SDAQ&A, it was an opportunity to say, well, I'm going to chat to people that have varied views, put them on the table,
Brilliant.
yeah,
Yeah.
shine that light,
Yeah.
decide for yourself. Mate,
Beautiful.
any
Lovely
close?
work.
Oh, thank you, Hal.
Yeah.
I love it. I love it. I tell you what,
Good on you.
it's something that I look forward to 2 times a week, and I'm trying to get these reaction videos going. Any closing thoughts that you'd like to summarize your journey and how happy you are to have kind of landed on your feet and be where you are right now? Would you say you're content and happy with life? I mean, the struggles, I'm sure.
Oh, look, I've had heaps of struggles. I've had 3 divorces in my life,
Yeah.
and uh, 2 of those were extremely painful. All of them were very painful. One that was one person made a decision, was very kind as you could possibly be through the whole process, which was very nice, and wasn't like, I'm going to take you to the cleaners for this. So I've been through some struggles. So I've been a single parent for many years, but I remember as a single parent, and I had no money, I couldn't even put money in a parking meter in the city. I had to park way out of the city to walk in one stage. And I remember I remember people asking me, "How you doing, Hal?" And I'd say, "Fantastic." And one person stopped me and said, "You always say that. Why do you say that?" And I said, "Well, my past is forgiven. My future is secure. Anything else that happens is pretty insignificant compared to that." And I feel just blessed to have landed on a point where I know that God loves me. I know that my past is forgiven. I know my future is secure in Him. I know where I'm going. He's given me a purpose on this earth. I'm 69 this year and still working because I feel like I'm doing it for a purpose. I work for Christian Schools Tasmania, who's like the most amazing Christian organisation. There's, I work with groundsmen and ground staff, and some of those are builders and do building work. We pray together, we worship together, we fellowship together. It's just not uncommon to find a group of guys or a group of people just praying, teachers included. And I just feel really blessed to be able to, I suppose, utilize the knowledge I've gained out of the building industry and all my years to help sow that back into what they're doing as a Christian organization. And I feel so blessed and so loved by God. And I've had ups and downs. I've had sicknesses. My brother died late last year, which was a shock. We got quite close because we worked together. He got a job. Got him a job at one of the schools for groundsperson. He was a bit of an engineering and genius and could do anything. And we worked together closely for 14 years. And he retired. He had 5 years. He retired at 75, and at 80 he passed away. And I spoke to him that morning, and he was working in his garden that he loved. He said his wife had just gone down to Hobart to pick up a friend. She got home, found him dead in the garden where I'd been talking to him.
Wow.
But you know what? He was an Adventist all his life.
Right.
And he wasn't a traditional Adventist. He understood a lot and wouldn't even go there. No, not interested in it. It doesn't affect anyone's salvation. He just wouldn't even go there. But he always went to an Adventist church, and he's a beautiful Christian guy. And so that was a shock. So there's ups and downs in life, but my goodness, your past is forgiven, your future's secure. Like, it just bumps in the road, honestly.
Yeah.
That's all I like to say as an ending.
I like it, Hal. I've loved chatting with you.
You too, Pete.
Everyone, if you want to support some of the funding I need just to tip it over the edge to make my trip to LA not too draining financially. As I said, I'm so thankful for James Andreas, who has provided funding. I hope he doesn't mind me saying that, for airfares and accommodation. But I do want to cover my own health insurance and long-term car parking. And so I've got
get behind it, everyone.
half of what I need. And yesterday was great. This is probably, I think I'm going to do a show Wednesday. So I've got today and next week. But I will need to pay tonight for a few things but I'll reach into the credit card for that. And it's funny doing this show. People say, well, how do you, what are you asking for money, or what's that like? To me, it's like, you'd know this when you're a musician, you're busking, you put your guitar case out, and you're basically saying, if you're enjoying the content, throw a few coins into the guitar case. That's all I'm asking. Scan that code. And some people also like to use which will take you to PayPal, but some people can't scan the code. So if you just look up my PayPal, it is paypal.me/Peter Dixon Music. Thanks again to those who are supporting what I'm doing.
It does come up, Avondale Music also sometime. Well, it did for me, and I wondered whether I was giving to you. So
yeah, I need to try and change that because it can get a bit confusing. So yeah, we'll definitely look into that. I try and make the life as minimally confusing as possible. Hey, so good to talk to you. Look forward to catching up with you again.
Yes, Peter.
Go and engage in the comments there in Facebook.
Yeah, bless you, mate, and have a great time in the US. Stay safe.
I
God
think
bless.
I'll do a little mini documentary when I go.
Yeah, great.
Video
Great.
stuff.
I can't always watch live because I'm often working, but
Yeah.
good,
Yeah.
good to catch up.
Yeah. Catch you soon, mate.
Bless you, mate.
See you
Cheers.
later.
Bye.